Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 223. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You-Know. This is a very special episode. On this episode, Jim and I do a Speeding Bullets segment. What we wanted to do is, before we go into our Gail Simone Spotlight next episode, and before we hit our Batman the Cult episodes, our next couple episodes are pretty set in stone now, we wanted to make sure to really kind of take a close look in these last two shows at a lot of books throughout the DC Universe. We tried to focus on a lot of ones we haven't touched on in a while, or at all, since they've had major changes, and also some of the favorites that we haven't visited in a while as well. So kind of a wide variety of titles that we've covered here. So definitely check the show notes to see what stories are on this one. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. I want to remind everyone to check out the New York Comic Con. It's October 8th, 9th, and 10th in New York. If you go on to RagingBullets.com, there's a handy-dandy link for you to click on so you can come and join us at the con. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. If you haven't been to the New York Comic Con before, please click on that site and check out the amazing guest list of talent. And they're constantly adding and updating that list as well, which is really great. So I'm excited for the New York Comic Con this year. That's once again October 8th, 9th, and 10th. That's nycomiccon.com. So definitely check that out. Also sponsoring us this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I love when the month kicks off because I look for those titles that are 75% off. It's great to see, especially when a new series is kicking off, that opportunity to pick it up at a discount. I was looking at this month, they've got Batman Inc. #1 from DC, Batman the Dark Knight #1 from DC, and Thunder Agents #1 from DC. All of them are 99 cents each because of that 75% off discount. Superboy #1 is 74 cents. If you look at getting all four of those titles, all of them put together are cheaper than one issue of most of those titles. So it's a great way if you want to try out those titles at a discount to do that through DCBService.com. And I really appreciate when they do that 75% off discount. They have a limit of 2, usually at that price point, and that's really great. So some cool opportunities to pick up some titles at a discount. And thank you, DCBService.com, for remaining our pre-order source. 2 episodes, Batman the Cult. We're going to be talking about that from InStockTrades.com. Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrightson, $19.99 regularly, 47% off, only $10.59. It's a new printing of the classic tale collecting the 4-issue miniseries from 1989. Deacon Blackfire, a charismatic shaman with roots as old as Gotham itself, has amassed the city's homeless into an army, one he seemingly uses to fight crime. But Blackfire has a hidden agenda. So be sure to join us for that in 2 episodes. Don't forget to check us out regularly at Get Your Geek on Radio. That's getyourgeekonradio.com, an online radio station committed to making geek chic. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing on the show. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the atom.
Jim, on our last episode, we did the Speeding Bullets, and we planned to get to more, but our discussions got so in-depth, and we actually talked about a ton of books. One of them that you really wanted to talk about was Azrael #11. And this is a book. Why was it that Azrael 11 was one that you said to me, dude, we've got to talk about this one?
Well, here's the thing with Azrael #11. With Azrael itself, it's been, kind of a Friday, Saturday read, and with the extra Bat titles coming in with all these things, I was actually looking at cutting it. This was a book that was on my chopping block, and I'm kind of glad I didn't because I was enjoying the read, and it was going pretty good. I was like, yeah, it's kind of neat, and there's, some good stories going on. I like the fact that it was a completely different guy. They were building a whole new kind of mythos around him, and just the whole, kind of his whole deal with the armor is going to eventually drive him crazy, but will it? Can he have the discipline to avoid that? Kind of had me interested, but I always figured I could drop this title as I never really saw it as being a huge connection to the DC universe. Yeah, there are, when we had Blackest Night and the various things, there would be an appearance or something, but there was never, I wouldn't figure there would ever be a major event that had a strong tie into this title. I'm like, this is something I could actually walk away from. And this current story arc completely changed that for me, because this has been just a great villain, but a fabulous, fabulous swerve at the end, where I was like, holy crud, I didn't see that coming. And it got me thinking about what's going to happen next, what could happen next, got me thinking real-world situations, and it jumped from a Saturday read to a Thursday, Friday read for me. And it just flew right up thing. I want to know how this plays out. I want to see the ending, the story arc. I really got to know what's going to happen here. And that's, for me, was something that, was a really big, kind of, jumpstart in, my reading and my enjoyment of this title.
This Crusader story by David Hine has been really dark and awesome. I do get into horror stories that skirt that religious line, and there is something horrifying when you get into twisting of religion. The original Omen is probably, for me, one of the scariest movies of all time because of this. This story, with this whole murdering of people in a fashion similar to the Book of Saints, is very creepy. The example, like that mimicry of the murder of Saint Sebastian, where he wasn't quite dead, but revived by Christ only to be beaten to death at the order of Emperor Diocletian. Okay, let's say you are there and you buy into his revival by God. Now, whether I'm a believer or not, I am going to question whether or not I should beat a guy to death who comes back from that. Yeah. Even if I don't believe, would I take that chance? It's funny when you hear those stories, and it adds, because there's a religious history to it, so to speak. That to me adds like a creep factor to the story for some reason. I don't know if you feel the same way or if you get that kind of vibe from it.
Oh, yeah, big time. That was another thing with, just the direct connotation, the direct connection with, with the Catholic faith, with the Christian faith, with the different martyrs, killing them the way the martyrs died. And I was just like eating this up going, wow, okay, yeah. I was initially thinking, okay, this is a, one of those villains that, kind of has the book wrong, and they're maybe a little bit, I never thought the guy could have any connection really to the real big power upstairs, but as the story's playing out, you start thinking, wait a minute, who's right, who's wrong here? And it's got you, it's got me, he's kind of has a Lex Luthor vibe in that, he's not completely evil in what he's doing. He thinks he's doing the right thing. He thinks he's following the word of God. And makes you kind of wonder when we get the big reveal at the end, is he or isn't he? Where is, what's going to be defined as the quote-unquote true path? And that's something that really just fascinates me, especially, definitely, the creative team really did their homework on this, unless maybe they already understood and had a firm grasp of the religion, but they really did their homework as to who, what, the whatnot behind the faith, behind the beliefs, and they're laying out a very believable story that, it's, on one hand, some people would say, oh, it's sacrilegious, it's wrong, but on the other hand, I look at this and I say, this is somebody who has an understanding, they have a grasp of what the faith is, and they're telling a great story using the knowledge and using that connotation, and for me, I just was eating this up.
Well, it's got elements of what I liked in Da Vinci Code and those type of films.
Amen. Big time.
What works about this Azrael, first of all, I like that he is one of the Batman that were supposed to replace Bruce. That when that whole vibe was going on in the main back title, I like that this is one of those guys that was from that. But I also like that he's part of this secret group that doesn't really tell him everything. He's trying to find his way to overcome the armor. He's also trying to find his redemption or place, I guess, in the world. But often their secrets cause him real turmoil, which, when you think about their secrets causing him turmoil, this dude is fighting the souls in his suit all the time, trying to keep them and the voices from them from overcoming him. And while he's having those battles, he is really dealing with people who aren't very forthcoming with him. You talk about faith. Here's a guy who needs some form of faith. whether it's religious or faith in himself or, faith in a set direction. And his world doesn't really provide him with a straight path. It has been very jagged along the way. And I found that very interesting. That his A to B, I'm not really quite sure what way that road needs to go. I'm enjoying journeying with him and feeling like I'm riding along in the chaos and sharing a lot of times his own frustrations with the elements that are going on around him. Who do you trust in his world is something that I really am digging.
Well, throughout this whole thing, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, the Order of Purity, yeah, there's a little bit, darkness to him, but he can basically trust them, right? Well, now he's like, I don't know if he can trust them. With the big secret, the big reveal, I was like, holy crud, what's, it really got to me. I was like, seriously sitting there thinking, going, wow, this is just a great reveal. This is a great, storyline. And do we want to throw it out there?
Oh yeah, we're going to go to this, so go right ahead.
Okay.
You're talking about the Shroud of Turin.
Talking about the Shroud of Turin. And when they started talking about this, I'm like, okay, yeah, Shroud of Turin, okay, and that's, for those who don't know, that was the, the wrapping of Jesus Christ, and it was left there, and his image is there, and turns out, according to the comic, the Shroud actually proved one thing. It proved that Jesus didn't die. He was never dead in the tomb. And they were talking, they broke it down great because they're saying, with the DNA left on there, the blood stain and all these, and they broke it down really nice, concise explanation that there was never a resurrection. The reason he got out of the tomb was because he wasn't dead. And I was like, oh, wow, that is just a nice play on it. And I was like, in one hand, you should, as I said before, there's going to be definitely people who will see this as a sacrilegious statement and or a sacrilegious book. But for me, I see this as just a great story using, this, using this faith in the way that, I was like, I really got into this. I was like, yeah, this is a cool story.
It's a work of fiction too. I mean, it's a story. It's not being billed as a Bible. It's being billed as Azrael, a comic book, where they're taking license with with religious history, and you got to put quotes on that. You and I are both Catholics, so we can throw that out there just for listeners, just to say, where are we coming from at it from the religious standpoint. I wasn't there was no point in time when I was reading any of this I was offended. It was just the opposite. I was engaged by it. I'm like, oh wow, I'm a fan of. And I think it is growing up watching shows like Doctor Who, we watched things like Voyagers, and we talk about Quantum Leap and time travel shows. Any of those shows, not on the religious end always, but on the historical end, will take liberties and sometimes throw in conspiracy theories and things like that to events from the past. And I actually quite like this because it's kind of engaging when they're going into religion and kind of saying, okay, let's play around with this historical story a little bit. This religious history story, I should say, a little bit. And let's see, what if this was the case? What if that was the case? And, playing with some of the mysteries of religion and saying, let's have a little fun here. And it's fiction. It's a work of fiction. And I loved that. It was something to me that I immediately found. I'm like, first of all, I think it's ballsy to go there. And I think it makes for a different kind of story, which is, to me, when you were talking before about, does this book get on the chopping block or not? This has never been on the chopping block for me because it's very different. I don't need it to be a part of, and I'm not saying you're wrong for this, but I don't need a book to be a part of the greater continuity for me to be engaged by it. I need a book to feel different and unique and to add something to my reading list because I read a lot of books. If you're going to be on the chopping block, it's going to be because I'm already getting that experience elsewhere. Azrael, for a lot of the reasons you stated, is giving me something so completely, compellingly different than any other title I've read. And I love that it feels different. I loved the original Azrael series done by Denny O'Neil with Jean Paul Valley. I love that this doesn't feel like Azrael 2.0. This takes elements of that concept, but really has gone in a very different direction. It does feel like it has echoes of what was going on with the Order of St. Dumas and all that back then, but because of this Order of Purity that you mentioned is so drastically secret society and so very different in the way that it operates, this book is very different in the way that it's been in an approach. And I've really loved that. And it's actually done very well with multiple writers who I think have really understood the concept, and it's continued to move forward. Like David Hein taking over, kudos to him, because I was loving what Fabian Nicieza was doing. David Hein takes over, and I feel this book hasn't skipped a beat. It really is just as compelling. This Crusader story has just had me, chomping at the bit. And I agree with you, echo with what you're saying, like, this is a title now. I rarely wait to read Azrael. It's usually my first night. We talk about like Secret Six and, if a Brightest Day comes out or something like that. But Azrael's in that initial stack that I grab of books that I'm like, I've got to read this now because I want to see what's going to happen next. And that's something that I found really exciting about this book.
And, it's the thing I'm really digging about this is the fact that within this one main story arc, we have multiple stories, multiple adventures going on at the same time. And we have like this, first off, who's telling the truth? What's going to happen? What's, Azrael going to do? What's he going to do to the priest? What's he going to do to Crusader? There's so many what's he going to do? What's going to happen here? That's the kind of story that, on the surface, I was thinking, okay, yeah, we got one bad guy. He's got to take out the bad guy. No, that's just the smallest portion of the story. There's so much beyond that. And that is, for me, the excitement of the title.
Well, one of the other things that really grabs me about this book is I like that everything you're talking about, the big problem Azrael's facing right now is he still does not 100% know what's going on. He has bits and pieces. So when you don't know who to trust, when you don't know what's right, I mean, basically everything that he's found out right now flies in the face of religion, flies in the face of everything that he's believed in, puts him in a place where people that he thought he trusted, he doesn't know if he can trust anymore. This Crusader character has really put him through the ringer, and he's put into a place right now where he has to say to himself, what is the right move for me to do? He's very angry and very enraged, but a lot of times when you're in that state, especially when you don't have all of the info, you are very prone to making a horrible mistake. You could make a terrible decision. You could side against the wrong people. And I love that there's that feeling there of, yes, he could be totally right, and I'm on the ride with him, but I could also see him making a mistake here. Not that he will, but there's something human about that.
I love the ending, lines that he has there, the inner dialogue that he's telling himself. He's like, I will go with you to find the keeper of secrets. I will hear everything you have to tell me, and then God is my witness, I will cut out your lying heart.
Right.
That right there was just I read that, I was like, oh my God, this is going to get good.
I find it interesting that Day and his crew seem to want to have the shroud revealed. Yeah. How is the Inner Circle trying to improve the world with this? Because he said it will improve the world. How will it do that? Because to me, that would send dangerous ripples through the world. When you start cracking people's faith, I'm not talking about people who are die-hard believers. That is their life, and they have devoted themselves to that. To all of a sudden tell them, hey, guess what? What you have devoted yourself to is fiction. It's wrong. What you were led to believe, and we have proof of it. So you're taking something that was faith before, and now you have been able to disprove it. That's something that will shatter people. I don't see how did you think they meant they were going to improve the world with that?
Well, there have been a lot of people who, will try to, either anti-religion statements or just general commentary about what is religion. If a lot of people, it's a crutch, it's this, yada, there's the various things. And a lot of them will say one thing, that if we didn't have these organized religions, that a lot of the issues and problems that people face are because of an organized religion, because they're following what they believe. It's not organized religion is not a perfect system because it is basically, run and maintained by human beings. It's not actually, there's not a direct pipeline to God. So because of that, mankind is going to distort it. Mankind is going to, twist things around. Just think of over the history of mankind, the number of times that something has occurred, whether it's wars, destructions, bombings, you name it, in the name of religion. If those events were taken out, people then would look at each other as people. It wouldn't be looked at, looking at this person as a Jew, looking at this person as a Muslim. No, those are people instead. And there's a strong argument that goes around. Now, just want to verify, just in case anybody is upset by those statements I made, those are not my opinions. These are just the general argument that people use against organized religion. And it's funny because when I hear stuff like that, I can actually recognize, you're making some valid points, but there is that piece in me, that faith in me that, blocks me from, saying, yeah, I completely agree with you, because I don't believe them. I have my faith, I have my beliefs, and I'm very strongly, connected to those. But you can, if you look at it with a logical mind, you can say, okay, I understand what you're saying here, and I can see this kind of deal. Now, some stuff I disagree on. I'm kind of like with you, where if you take away someone's faith, you take away someone's hope, are you actually going to make the place better? What's to keep a person from thinking, okay, now that, you've proven to me that there is no heaven, that means the only consequences that I have to deal with are ones here on earth. Okay, so all I got to do is just plan a better crime and I can get away with stuff. And will people then go to a darker side, not thinking that there is something else out there, that final eternal judgment? I personally don't know. I look at it, one day I'll say yes, it's the fact that people are afraid of that eternal judgment that keeps them from, doing wrong, from doing harm to people. Then on the other side, I'm like, no, it's not a fear of the punishment coming. It's the warmth, the light behind the faith. It's that belief that, it's that kind of like, touching and, becoming one with kind of like, the spirit, that makes us do these good things. So there's a constant argument, one inside my head, but it's interesting to see this actually play out in not only modern society, but in this comic book as well. Because, that's one of the connections I'm really getting to Michael now, in that, he's got this conflict. He's very solidly set, just based on that last line, that he's sticking strongly to what the faith says, that this is, all a giant lie, and he's going to end the lie right there. But, the priest was sitting there talking to him, saying, hey, that's the Crusaders line, so you're going to side up with him. You're going to join this person who is torturing and killing people. It's one of those things. I really am dying to see where this goes, how this, ends up. Because
do you see Michael joining up with the Crusader?
Right now, his mindset is kind of in the same line as the Crusader. That final line where he says, I'm going to listen to what you said, then I'm going to cut your lying heart out. That is the Crusader's line in this. The Crusader said, you guys are doing blasphemy. I'm going to kill you all and destroy the Shroud. So that's how I see right now. Michael is little bit on the Crusader
Michael,
side.
at the end, I got the impression Michael was going after the Crusader. I didn't see him as siding with the Crusader. I saw him after he's done with his business with the Crusader coming back after Day. But I didn't see him letting the Crusader continue what he's doing. I see him right after this. I mean, my feeling is that he's building towards going after the Crusader. There's going to be a big confrontation. Then there's going to be hell to pay for Father Day. I totally saw what you see. I mean, obviously his dialogue is dead set right there with going after Father Day afterwards, and we're 100% in agreement there. But I don't see him right now going up and going all buddy cop with the Crusader. I see him as seeing the Crusader as somebody who needs to be stopped, and then I got to come back and deal with you, Father Day. How could you hide this? And what? And how is he going to deal with that after the fact? Because I don't think he agrees with what the Crusader's doing at all.
Here's the only line, the inner dialogue, where he says, I've seen what the Crusader can do. His powers are miraculous. Surely they must come from God. That line right there makes me think he is starting to side up with the Crusader. He's starting to think that Crusader may be on the right side.
The powers come from there, but that doesn't... I never took that as Michael saying, hey, I'm going to go pal up with him or anything like that. He's just verifying that that's where the powers are from. I guess I don't... And I mean, I can see how you're getting at that point. I just don't see him as necessarily siding with him, because I really took the epilogue like... I don't see next issue kicking off with him taking down Father Day. I see him continuing to go after the Crusader.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. And that's part of my excitement behind this is I don't really exactly know where he's sitting.
Why would he want the Crusader to cover this up? Because I don't see him, with his rage and his anger, if the Crusader really is trying to cover this up, I can't see Michael as trying to... I don't know. It's an intriguing story because I'm very curious to see where it's going to go from here. But do you see next issue as kicking off with more of Michael confronting Father Day?
Well, I don't think so. It's weird because
Okay.
when I think about this, one, I do wonder who he wants to kill more. If he wants to take out the Father, if he wants to take out the Order of Purity, maybe he's looking at this as if the Order of Purity is lying, and that's why he wants to take them down, and not, truly covering up the fact, the information they have. Maybe in his head he's thinking, okay, the Order is lying about everything, about what the Shroud really is, and everything that they've told him about the Shroud. Maybe he's thinking, okay, this is just big science trying to destroy the faith.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know. I am thrilled to see where this is going to finally go, because I have an opinion that I think we're going to end up seeing. Azrael versus Creator, big fight. We're not going to get those two saying, "Hey, you're on the right side. Let's
Right.
join forces." I don't think that's going to happen, but I can't see him continually trusting the Order. I see the Order turning on both of them when they get to the Shroud.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. I'm very curious because I can't see Azrael as giving a pass to the Crusader for what he's doing. I can't see that being something that he's going to be okay with and going to let stand. I just don't see that being the case. But I'm not 100% sold. I will say this. I'm not 100% sold on what direction I think this is going to go in. And the mystery is intriguing to me because of that. I'm not entirely convinced that at the end he's going to go after Father Day. I think where Azrael's going to have a problem here, though, is what does this mean for him? He's been going along with the Order of Purity. A lot of the things that he's been doing as this agent of the Order of Purity has been in their name and following what he believed was the right thing to do with them. What does this mean for him status quo-wise after this? And where does he go? And what is he going to be seeking? I do think it's going to make it very interesting when Bruce returns. With where is Azrael going to go after that? Because everything that he has known before and this whole direction in this is now going to come into question for him. And what place does that put him in, status quo-wise, at the end of it? I like that. I mean, he's in an interesting place. And I love that about the character, that we get to see continual growth. I wonder if we're going to see him more as an independent thinker as this goes on, if that makes sense. More of a free agent versus being so tied to the Order of Purity?
Yeah, I can't see him staying with the Order after all this is done. Unless they really do a 180 and or really lay it out and explain what's actually going on, why they're going to help the world by doing what they're planning. I can't see him staying with them because this is such a blow to his faith. And part of the reason I think that Michael, is kind of controlling the insanity and the craziness that comes with the Armor of Sorrow has been that faith. And now that's being questioned. Are we going to start losing Michael a little bit more into this? Are we going to get a little bit more Azrael out of this? Or will he be able to, contain and maintain who he is?
What is he losing faith in, though, Jim? I mean, I guess, okay, so we're losing... He would lose faith in the Christ story, but that's only one element of that religious belief.
That's the backbone of it. The resurrection's the backbone.
Well, that's the backbone of the Son of God, but not the backbone of... I mean, there was a religion before all of that, Jim. So, I mean, that doesn't cancel out everything. That just cancels out one element of the story. I guess what I'm saying here is, I don't know what the Order of Purity's goal here is. I don't necessarily... It's one area, I think, where you and I kind of veer off. I don't see their goal being to end religion. I don't see that coming out of this, because that in and of itself, that reveal, wouldn't end religion. And even if, let's say they could totally wipe out... go further with what you're saying with that being the backbone, because I don't see that as being the backbone. I see that being the backbone as a major facet of when Catholicism branched off and became its own thing, sure. But everything that came before that, that basically wipes out elements of the New Testament, the majority of the New Testament, I should say, but not the Old Testament. So, and barring that, why is there religion? religion comes from people's need to explain the unknown, to understand the unknown. Some of it's from fear, as you mentioned before, which I'm totally with you on. But others of it is, where did we come from? How did we all start here? Was it a big poof? Or was it some guy named Phil playing on a Wii, and that's what we're all living from? And, like, we get stomach aches, it's just him shaking the controller too hard. We all want to know, like, where did this all come from and what really is going on? We also have this need to believe that when we die, we're more than just worm food, that's part of the fear that you're talking about. So I don't think there's anything about this that could wipe out religion, and I don't see that being the case. But we're talking about the shroud. It wipes out, I agree with you, it totally wipes out the resurrection, which then changes that whole element of the Christ figure. But it wouldn't wipe out the whole religion before it.
Well, it wouldn't take out the earlier stuff, but if you remember when he was explaining to Michael about, what the Order of Purity, they said they are in every major religion throughout, the world. Now, if they got these people in all these places throughout all the religions, if they have this massive, nuclear bomb that they can drop on Catholicism, maybe they have the same type of stuff for the other religions. Maybe they have other things that would completely shred these other beliefs.
So are they then trying to promote their idea of purity?
Yeah.
Is the Order of Purity then from the inside trying to infiltrate and promote their idea of purity, like maybe a new religious consciousness? Because I don't see anyone as being able to and making their MO to wipe out religion. You're always going to be shooting for your own end game, your own end goal. I can't see Father Day being a part of a group. Maybe I'm wrong about him. That which would be interesting as well. So, if I'm totally, if it is more in the direction you're going, it could be interesting. I'm not against it. But I'm finding fascinating about this is that is the overall goal of the Order of Purity with their agents all over the world the same goal that we're seeing here, to disprove? Or is it ultimately to prove, to find out what they can prove? I don't know. I'm very curious to see what the direction of this is and where it's going. This story, take a look at the talk that we're having right now. We've totally branched off the book now, and we're really kind of pulling in, our own different senses of religion. And it is funny, you and I both grew up with similar religious backgrounds, but it is clear in this discussion that we do veer off in certain areas. Because my view anymore of religion is, I still have my same beliefs that I grew up with. I went to Catholic school, from kindergarten straight on through. I still have the same basic religious beliefs, but I am a lot more open-ended to the idea that we could all be wrong, and there really could be some guy named Phil with a Wii doing all this. I mean, I am more in that theory now. I'm a lot more, I guess, religiously tolerant would be and tolerant of people who don't believe too. So it is interesting in this story that I think it is something where you can connect on a personal level. And I think it is where we're both gaining the same enjoyment in different ways from this story, because you and I view religion just slightly differently in certain areas. And so we're seeing the story differently based on our own personal views. Maybe. I don't know if you're getting that vibe or not, but I don't know, it's something I found engaging about this discussion. Like, we went off on this big religious tangent on a story that really was a creepy horror story about this crusader using religion as a way to kill people. But it really did get a lot deeper with this whole Shroud of Turin thing. That's why when you said, should we go to this? I think you have to, because it just shows where the story went in one direction and took it to one level. And that reveal in the story to me is where you start thinking heavily outside the book. Yeah. And you start connecting with things and starting to make your own judgment. I'm a big fan of comics. We both are a big fan of comics where it's not just when I'm reading it. It's what does that book leave me with afterwards? I don't care if everything I've just said right now, as far as what I'm thinking might happen next issue or what I believe is going on right now is totally proven wrong next issue. I love the fact that right now I care enough about the book that I'm actually thinking about it afterwards. That it matters. I want to know what's going on in Michael's head. I want to know what Father's Day MO is. I want to know more about the Order of Purity. Have they been screwing with us all along? Is there something more? And those are things that they're burning questions that we both clearly have from this discussion is what is real, what is not. That's kind of a fun, fascinating thing about this book. And this is a book, I totally agree with you. I could not drop this. This is a book that came when it first kicked out. I remember it was during Battle for the Cowl. We got the first special. I was really digging the idea of an Azrael coming back. I enjoyed the series. This is another one where there's been a great build, where it started off a certain way, and I loved the links to Ra's al Ghul, and because of the suit, and Bruce Wayne, and where that all came from, and the fact that he was, like I mentioned, one of the lost Batman. You know, one of the ones that were going to replace Bruce, but ultimately that went horribly wrong. And it's so grown into us getting to know Michael Lane, seeing where he had to, as this kind of agent of judgment that he was doing, he had to face down former loves, family members, things like that, and really had to decide who he is and what he stands for. And there's something vulnerable about this guy, and they keep playing with his humanity, his vulnerability, his beliefs, and yet he seems to persevere. You know, he seems to, at the end of it, find a way to keep going on, that's what I like about the character, and I think that's something that I think is important to talk about in this piece is I like Michael Lane. I actually enjoy following him. I get angry when he gets angry. I get worried when he gets angry as well. But I do, there's something I like about him. I do feel like he's the buddy right now that I want to talk down.
Oh, definitely. You know, he's the guy that I don't want to see him go to the darkness. I want to see him stay in the light. I want to see him, be that hero that is inside him. And it's one of those things where, I'm now so much more connected, so much more vested in this. Before, they were good stories. I was enjoying reading them. I like seeing, when Dick Grayson made a couple appearances, when Damian was interacting with him. I was like, okay, yeah, this is a good read. It's fun, but now I am personally invested in this guy. And this is just a title that I am really, I got to know what happens.
Yeah, amen. That's the best way to put it. And it is kind of funny. I'm kind of at the point right now where I don't really want to keep disputing you because that's not my feeling right now. I'm not like sitting here digging my heels in and going, geez, Jim, you're wrong. I actually was really enjoying listening to your whole rant. And I fully realize that a lot of my thoughts and theories are just things that I'm formulating right now. I'm not really set on much of anything other than I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But I don't feel like I have a handle on it.
And with like a lot of my theories, if I were to be completely wrong and they lay it out in the story, I would probably fully accept it. There's so many different ways this story can go in my head, and I've looked at and I've thought about that. Just what I just said now was one storyline that I was thinking one way of thought. There have been complete opposites and stuff that have been complete agreement with what you've said, where I've thought that as well. So it's again one of the strengths of the story. If I find myself, when I'm not reading the comic, thinking about the title, thinking about where the story could go to, that for me is a reason to, yes, this is that what bumps it to a Thursday read, that thinking outside the box, thinking, when I don't have the comic in front of me, I am thinking about it. And this book is, issue 11, it's taken that long to really develop that, connection and that strong feeling, along with Azrael.
But I think it's something that it is something I'm noticing in a lot of my books that are becoming more of my favorite titles. I mentioned in the last episode another book actually by David Hine, The Spirit. It's a book that has slowly grown to the point where I'm really enjoying the character of the Spirit. I'm really getting into it. It was a book that I was very similar to what you're saying about Azrael right now. I was enjoying it first, but I wasn't invested. But it hit a point now where I'm invested. But I don't think I would be invested right now if it wasn't for those initial issues building to this. The Shield was another book that I used as an example of that, where it was worthwhile going on that journey because when it built to this kind of crescendo point, to this point where I'm like, ooh, okay, now I'm hooked. It was worth the ride and building the history of the character to get to this point. And it is funny how there's certain books where you talk about faith, you have to have a little faith in the concept that if you liked it enough to pick up the book initially, give it a chance before you drop it. There may be a point where you do need to drop it. Maybe it isn't for you. But this Azrael is a great example of where I was invested because I really liked the concept. And the payoff is right now at issue 11 where I'm totally hooked. And agree with you that it's moved up the stack because of that. But I do think it wouldn't mean as much to me if I hadn't gone on the journey earlier. I want to comment on the artwork. Gilliam March's artwork on this one, and I'm probably butchering the name, and I apologize. And the colors by, it's Tomeu Mori, really nail the setting of tormented souls that Michael is constantly combating, the despair that he's eventually destined to have overwhelm him with this, the whole suits and everything. I like the idea this is a guy trying to hold back and maybe defeat an inevitable destiny. That he seems destined that everybody who's worn this suit before is cracked. Imagine you're wearing a time bomb, a mental, emotional, whatever you want to call it, spiritual time bomb on yourself. In the midst of everything that's going on around him, how do you keep it together enough to keep that from overwhelming you? And that's a part of the piece that's really important to remember. It isn't just the fact that all this stuff's going on outside of him. It's what's going on inside because of what he's wearing. This Ken doll's got a really bad ascot on. I mean, the whole St. Ambrose and the bees thing on Father Day, for me, the thought of insects or anything invading the body is truly terrifying to me. It's the sense of dying from the inside out, that being smothered, that kind of thing. That's stuff that I find super freaky. A lot more so than getting my head chopped off or things like, you know what I mean? When you see sequences like that, I'm in horror movies, I can see that kind of, chop this off, that off, fine. That's, because it's almost instantaneous. But that slow suffocation kind of thing that was going on with that bee sequence for me, the way it was drawn and the look on Father Day's face and the fact that we got to see that whole thing going on for quite some time in the issue. Yeah. And that was something where it was clear that was used to try and get the secret out of him, but it was especially when it came out of the Crusader's stomach. His body was shifting and it was actually physically
pieces of him making the bees.
Yeah, I mean, it was something where I love a good horror story. And this is something where I think the artwork, besides the great rich dialogue, has been something that was really in this issue in particular, but throughout the series, because this is talk about different writers. We've had different art teams throughout the series, and that stayed very consistent throughout the series, where it's had that great kind of feel to it, of it's a right mix of. Feels like it's in the Batman universe, but yet it's got a little bit more of a horror element. It reminds me, to a certain extent, like it's, in a weird way, a stepbrother to what I liked about Simon Dark. Because it's set in this Bat world, but yet it's in a little bit of the darker area of the Bat universe. And there's seeing some stories that you wouldn't necessarily always or very regularly see as a Batman type case, but this is doing these type of things monthly, and I really like that.
That's a cool comparison, stepbrother to Simon Dark.
Because I really like that book, Simon Dark, and that was it's something to me like it feels like it's in that family. So it's a good book.
If we're talking art, there is one panel I just got to say I absolutely thought was an amazing panel. It's where Father Day actually says, the shroud proves that Jesus Christ did not die on the cross. There was no resurrection. Just the look on his face, and then the side and the kind of like the background is the cross on Calvary, and you can kind of see what shadowy figure of what I take to be Mary, with the body of Jesus and that kind of stuff. And that panel right there, it's right at the bottom of the page, and just the look in his eyes and just the emotion etched on his face. That right there was just a beautiful piece of artwork.
Cool. Can we talk a little bit about Wonder Woman 602?
Oh yeah,
just kind of casually.
Okay.
It's it's funny. I was a big fan. Obviously I'm a Gail Simone junkie. So her run on Wonder Woman is, to me, it's one of those iconic runs now, that it's going to be in my list. I've enjoyed, like, the Perez run, Phil Jimenez, I talk about Mesmer Loeb's work and things like that. There's been a lot of runs of Wonder Woman that I've really enjoyed. And I'm talking about really good, the contest stuff, the Challenge of Artemis. I loved all that stuff. So the most recent run, and you know how much we loved the relationship that she built with Thomas, and then, everything that was going on with the Circle, and just how that all played out was great. I loved that. So when you hear that we're going to be doing a major status quo change, it's something very tentative at first. I was glad. I would probably be less open to all this if she didn't have a chance to end her run nicely. And I really think that's really important, to give somebody a chance to end the run cleanly. giving them those final issues and her chance to be a part of 600 and how that all worked out. It felt so nice for her to have an epilogue to that. And that's really important that comic companies recognize that not only does the writer and the creative team previously need that, the readers need that too. Because if you're going to do something like this, you can't drop us into this without giving us a sense of closure on what came before. So that being said, Diana's new world is interesting to me so far. The gods want something from her. How will Diana deal with the loss of members of the Amazons and that the gods did not help? That shield constructed from her mother's image and seeing her fight with the sword added an iconic element to this new look, which I really needed at this point. Because I dig the new look. I'm into it. I'm it's no secret on the show that I'm more of a traditionalist. I get into, I love Diana's original costume, but on the other hand, talk about the contest. I liked during the contest when Diana had her own little costume while Artemis was running around in the traditional suit. We had that traditional going on with Artemis wearing it with kind of a new look because she had the winged boots and everything. But then we had Diana running around in her own outfit during that time. It was kind of like when Captain America and U.S. Agent were kind of doing their thing. It was that kind of vibe, and I liked that because you knew it was going to be temporary. You knew Diana was eventually going to come and take it back, but it was fun to go on that journey with her. So it was interesting in this now. Do you think they're heading in the direction where we're looking to keep this look? Or do you think that this story is going to eventually end and we're going to see Diana back in a more traditional outfit? Where do you think this is going, Jim? Do you have any... Is it too soon to tell?
It's actually, I say too soon to tell where this is going to go to. When, I was very nervous when first started seeing signs of it. Even after the couple issues we've had with, the story arc going on, I'm still going, okay, what's going on? The thing that's calmed me down and doesn't have me up in arms or angry or anything is, one, my faith in JMS, his writing ability. Because I know he's a good writer. I enjoyed his work, so I'm like, okay, this is a guy whose writing style I enjoy, so I'm going to give it some time. And then also at the San Diego Con, where he, because he does mention there's going to be connections, there's going to be tie-ins with, what we know and what the current, the last Wonder Woman arc, and everything's going to be explained. So I'm like, okay, I'll give you your time to explain it, because
we started to see that, though.
Yeah.
Because she's had dream sequences where it's clear that the memories are in her subconscious, or there is a connection there. We've already gotten hints and teasers at that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, see, for me, my biggest fear wasn't with a new look on Wonder Woman or even a change. It was the Wonder Woman supporting characters like Donna and Cassie. Those are two superheroes that I really enjoy. I like seeing, Donna in the Justice League. I love seeing Cassie as the leader of the Teen Titans. I don't want to lose them in their position. And this new status of Wonder Woman, they're not around really. And I can't see how they would have been in this universe, the way they were. Because they grew up on that Paradise Island where it was all the Amazons and that kind of deal, where it was they grew up in that whole, more peaceful sisterhood.
Cassie didn't.
She didn't?
No. And actually, there's stories. There's a lot of history to those characters, and Donna especially. It's funny, we talk on the show about Hawkman's many stories and many history changes. Donna's gone through quite a few herself. Their stories aren't as clean cut as being a part of that. Actually, one of the things that I really liked that JMS said in one of the panels was that he was staying away from them because it would, first of all, take away from the focus on this. And, they're busy in their own books doing their own thing to try and bring them into this and make them a part of this whole event. It would actually be too much because the focus needs to be on Diana right now. And I quite agree with him on that, because I would be echoing what you're saying, because I know where you're going with this. If they took Donna away from Justice League right now to put her into this and kind of change her status quo over all this, or Cassie from Teen Titans, because I do feel like that book, it's not where my Justice League is for me right now, but I feel the build, the way I did with Justice League, where I'm going to be getting a Titans soon that I'm connecting with the way that I used to. If they changed that right now, I would be throwing shoes at things at the moment, because I love Donna so much in Justice League. And I think this is where, I hope I'm right on where you're going with this, because my passion right now for Justice League has not just been Dick Grayson, and how well they're nailing his internal dialogue. Donna Troy feeling like she's evolved, and she's like this hero who really loves being a hero again. And she's worked past a lot of her demons, and she's embracing life again, and embracing embracing what it means to be a member of the Justice League, and how this is something with her where she's found her calling. And we all go through transition points in our life where we have those new things. If they had taken that away with this, I would be very angry as well. So I'm glad that he is focusing on Diana, which also gives me a lot more faith. Because if you were permanently changing Diana's status quo and changing all of this, you'd have to change Cassie and Donna, right?
Yeah, you would have to make some serious changes, or at least acknowledge how they tie in. That's kind of once I started getting that, because that was my biggest fear, and we are in the same line of thought where we're both really, I don't want to lose Donna, I don't want to lose Cassie, and we both are. You were right, we are kind of going in the same direction there. Now, the thing that does have me wondering, and this is something that only time is going to tell, are we going to find out that these titles, these issues we've had, are an Elseworld? Is this actually going to still remain in continuity? Or is it going to go back to something the way it was? Or is there going to be a melding, a meshing of what was and what is?
I don't see this as being a For Tomorrow, where it feels like more outside, because For Tomorrow, while yes, you could say it was in continuity, it kind of feels like it was its own contained piece as well. I see this as being, with the fact that we're already seeing her start to remember her former life, and JMS has already said that we're going to see her interact with the DC Universe proper, I'm assuming that's as she gets more connected with the world around her. It starts to remember. I think we're going to see what's really going on. I don't think we know what's going on yet. And I think once we see what's going on, I think we're going to see how she could possibly connect with the DC Universe proper.
And that's the part I want to see, and that's the part I'm not going to judge this either way, good or bad, just because I know there's so much that's yet to be told in this story. Now, when this story wraps up, if there's not that clean tie-in, that clean connection, and I'm still left with a lot of questions, then I'm going to be like, okay, what's going on here? And that could put a negative spin on all this stuff. But right now, I'm reading it. I'm actually kind of in my mindset thinking of it as an Elseworld story that may tie into the DC Universe, may tie into the DC proper, but I'm not right now seeing this as coinciding at the exact same time as like JLA story or Superman story going on. I see this as being kind of like another bubble type deal. So I don't know. That's kind of how I'm able to deal with it, by having that mindset. Now, I could be completely wrong, and this is something else, and that's where you just lay the trust in the creative team. And I have some trust in his abilities to tell a story, so I'm going to just sit back, read what comes out, and see what happens when the final chips fall.
Now, here's my question. First of all, actually, let's go right to this, because you kind of mentioned this before. Do you like this? Or where are you at on that?
As a story-wise, as a comic book, yes, I'm enjoying it. I am enjoying the story. I like seeing, okay, that's kind of cool. With the new costume came out, I am definitely not one of those purists who it must look like the original costume. I like people tweaking and creating the costume. I thought the new look was kind of cool. I would actually like to see that, when this story is done, see, Diana wearing that outfit. When I say Diana, I'm talking the Diana that, my Wonder Woman, okay? That Diana that had that great story that was created throughout her, relaunch throughout the Circle, throughout all of the Gail Simone stuff. That's my Diana. That's the Diana I know and I really enjoy reading. Now, are we going to go back to exactly that? I don't know. And that's what I want to see what's happening. But to answer to the story, your question, yes, I am enjoying this. It is an enjoyable read, but I'm not as connected to this Wonder Woman as I was before. The Gail Simone Wonder Woman run was a Thursday night must-read kind of, oh my God, this is cool. I'm not ashamed to say I'm a Wonder Woman fan. kind of deal where I could throw out, those childish notions I had in my head about, can you really say you're a fan of a female superhero? Yes, I could without any hesitation. This Wonder Woman, I'm enjoying the story. I'm still, mature enough that I can say, yes, she's a cool character and this is a cool title, but I'm not as vested, connected, and as, this is the, my Wonder Woman kind of deal.
See, I am. And let me explain why. Going back to actually talking about the previous run, I think Gail made me so Wonder Woman happy that I'm very into the character. I'm enjoying following the mystery right now. There is a tentative part to that as far as I desperately want to believe in that this is going to lead to there being a major connection to what we have already seen from her before. That those dreams that she's having are not, and JMS has said they aren't a red herring. We are going to see how she's connected to the previous Wonder Woman. And I have a feeling that her powers, how there's those hints that she isn't fully connected with her powers yet. The reason why she hasn't fully connected with her powers yet is she hasn't connected with herself yet. And I think once we start to see her connect more and more with herself, we're going to start to see more and more of her powers emerge. And I could be diving at this, but like, for example, the mentioning from the that she could fly, but yet she isn't able to right now. You know what I mean? Those type of hints and things like that, like that these powers are something we are going to see her reconnect with at some point. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that, but those are things that right now I'm kind of grasping at. But a lot of that is due to the fact that I've been so Wonder Woman happy before that I'm like, I want to believe that this story is going to connect. I do feel that this story, to some extent, is happening relatively close to the present day. Now, does part of me believe that there's a possibility that our Diana is still operating and, that we're going to see how this all interconnects at some point? Yes. I don't know. I don't know how this is going to play out. I do say one thing. When they showed the first costume images, I went in with an open mind, and I got to say, I actually like the design a lot. I am a purist, and I'm very torn in the sense that I love the original Wonder Woman design, but I'm not against this outfit. I find there's a lot to it I find cool. She needs to keep the jacket on, though. Could you possibly put more straps? But that's a minor nitpick, and I'm going to say that. But I remember when she took off the jacket, I'm like, oh no, we need less. Because I loved the theory that when she took off the jacket, I adored the action sequence. So I totally got what JMS was saying in the interview, saying that when she takes off the jacket, look out. I loved those moments. We got to see her kick some serious butt there, and we saw the heroism of her. That is really important. You got to show me those elements of Diana that are really important. So I got to see those vibes there. But I kept looking there saying, like, is there anywhere else we could put a strap? which was, it's a funny little nitpick of mine, but it is when you're looking at an iconic costume versus a newer one. I think that is my brain freeze, that I tend to prefer the more traditional outfit. And that might be what's doing that to me, because normally I have a funny feeling that I would just be totally adoring this costume. And I think it's because it's Diana that there's that part of me I'm clutching onto one thing while at the same time opening my mind to something new, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm enjoying the ride, but there are those elements of me that are digging in the dirt in one way and digging in the dirt another way. But yet, it is something where I do find that I tend to read this one relatively early because I want to know what's going on. So they've got me there, in the sense that I want to know what is happening to Diana. How does this connect? And I am somebody that they've got to sell on that connection. Like, that's really important to me. I need a satisfactory connection to it. But they are gripping me in the story, and I'm very well aware, like you said, where this feels like very Elseworldy-ish right now. I like that kind of stuff. So I'm okay with that, as long as we're not throwing everything out the window.
Yeah, I do want to, I don't want to say I want him to write, write Gail Simone Wonder Woman. He's got to put his own spin on it. He's got to put his own touch on it, and he's got to make the character his own. That's when I think you get the best work out of a writer, when they're not, they remember and they're respectful for what has come before in continuity, but they do their own thing with it. And he needs to do that, but there are just I don't want to lose the Diana that I absolutely loved, and I'm worried. I don't want to say I'm worried because as I said, I do trust that he is I have trust in his skills as a writer, but I just want to see what's going to happen here. I am, as I said, I'm not as invested with this, and I really do like the new costume. Even when she took the jacket off, I think everything was kind of working there. So,
and that's great. I mean, it was something like for me. It's fun to share like kind of where you're landed. I think we're in different places as far as I think you're more open minded to a newer approach, whereas I'm kind of in the middle. Yet I'm enjoying the story. So which is perfect. That's the whole point. And I want to clarify something I said before. Like one of the things I liked about Gail Simone's run is she wasn't trying to write somebody else's run before her. She was trying to add something to the mythos, while at the same time honoring it. And you and I are totally in sync there. Like the whole bits with the lasso where she, showed us a whole new way of thinking about the way the lasso works. And, adding that new villain in Genocide and the Circle and just, exploring the Amazon history and everything with Themyscira. There was so much of that run that I liked. And she was adding new elements while at the same time honoring the old. And I feel like it's bringing in Amazon history, but coming at it from a new perspective, kind of a what if this happened instead? What if Hippolyta had died? It is funny how protective I am right now, like Hippolyta. I'm worried about Hippolyta. Are we losing Hippolyta in this story? Or is this something where when she connects with the real world, we're going to see something different? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I like Hippolyta a lot as a character.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the Amazons, just the idea of the Amazon code and just who they are. And then when we added the Manazons into the mix, I was like, okay, this is, I want to see more of that adventure, more of that, the Amazon culture coming back. So now we really have a Amazon culture that's been, kind of decimated. So I'm curious to see where that also goes, because it's not just Diana's journey; it's her people's journey as well. That's going, okay, where is this going to play out? What's going to be the end game?
Yeah.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look great neutron.
Jim, I want to talk a little bit about Justice League Generation Lost number 8. I'm kind of enjoying this whole Generation Lost world that's been built. Booster Gold's been fantastic. Generation Lost has been great. Time Masters has elements that connects with it thematically, as far as this exploration of Booster Gold as a hero who's got to kind of hide himself. Because you still see people thinking him the fool because of the way his whole MO's operating right now. Yet, it's funny how when I read these stories now, knowing what Booster's doing and seeing the heroism and how could you do what Booster's doing right now? Like, could you deliberately play yourself the fool, play yourself the out for himself kind of guy, when it's so clearly that Booster has matured from that character that he was back then? He's in a different place now. Could you let people continue to think of you that way? People who you respect, because there are people who he genuinely would take a bullet for that in many ways he has, yet he's let them think this, with the exception of Bruce, who seems to know.
Yeah, it'd be a tough thing to do, to be honest with you. I was going to crack a little joke about how people already think, that I'm a fool and I'm playing the fool part. But I'm going to be honest and straight and serious on this discussion, because that's one of the things about Booster that I do enjoy seeing, that he has to make that choice and he has to do that. And that's, we've talked about before on the show about what is the definition of a hero, what is the true makings behind a hero, and we're seeing that really hardcore in Booster, in the fact that he not only isn't truly going after the fame, he's diminishing his appearance, making people think he's an idiot, and no one will ever know. And it's not even something like in the future they'll know the truth. They will never know that Booster is doing what he's doing. And that's got to be a tough thing to deal with. I got a little bit of vanity in me. I fully admit that, but I'm not such huge in my vanity that I'm like, yes, look what I did. I did this great thing here. But there is still that part of me that likes getting appreciation, likes having someone say, "Hey, that was really good job you did there, Jim," or "Hey, we'll get emails or voicemails from people saying, "Hey, really like the show." I like those stuff when I get that because I'm like, okay, there's someone out there who's enjoying what I'm doing. I try to be funny, I try to be insightful and whatnot, but there's people, I like the fact that there are people out there who get that and who enjoy it. But if I were to all of a sudden just, disappear on the backside and there wasn't a sensei whatnot and there was somebody else and I was feeding that person like my lines or feeding that person my thought process and, doing that kind of stuff and no one ever knew that it was me, that would get to me. That would kind of, I'd be like, look at all this. There's all this cool stuff that's going on that one-liner that everyone's laughing about, that was mine. I would have a hard time with that. Just eventually down the line, I would want people to recognize that, hey, I'm kind of the funny guy here. I'm the one who came up with that, little, tangent that they went off on.
I have these images of you now feeding some twisted version of yourself in the basement. If I was feeding this sensei of the whatnot, he looks like Igor, but I keep him in my basement. Like, what are you doing? Okay. And nobody would know. But yet I'd want them to know. Because he's mine. That's all right, Jim. No, you know what it is? It's validation, though. And yeah. It's one of the things that I'm finding heroic about, because as a kid, when you play superheroes, you want to be characters like Superman, your Batman. Because when I grew up watching Batman was a character the city looked up to, in the 60s show. I've been watching episodes of it on videotape now, because it's funny. I was trying to see how I would connect with it nowadays, because I watched the film on Blu-ray, because they released that, but the TV show has never been released yet. So I had taped, when I was on TV Land, I had taped it on videotape, all the episodes. So I started going back through and watching them, and it's been years since I've seen them. And it's funny, the show's campy, but it's a lot more, like, there are serious elements. Like, there was one episode where at the end, Catwoman, like, they definitely played on the whole cat burglar aspect. And she tried to multiple times kill Batman and Robin, but she's escaping with all these jewels. And because of her thirst to be a cat burglar, she jumps over the edge of this, chasm, catches the other side, and she was trying to escape and make it to the other ledge, cleanly on her feet so she could keep running. She catches on with her claws and she's slipping. Rather than letting go of the jewels, she couldn't, which prevented her from grabbing the bat line, and she fell to her death. Now, this is a show that I was like, seriously saying, I'm like, boy, this show had a lot more serious elements than I really realized. Yes, there was a camp aspect to it, but there were some really good stories in that series. But one of the things that's consistent with that series and where I'm going with this is, and like the Superman films with Donner, these were characters growing up when you saw them, and Super Friends, everyone liked them. There was a public persona to them. Where they were like heroes that you wanted to be because you knew that if people saw you, they would admire you for what you do. And there is a validation aspect, and you said it before, there's a vanity aspect to it, to a certain extent. There's something noble, there's something heroic, but then there's also validation that you're being noble and heroic, and you get that give and take in the relationship. Booster doesn't get that. His relationship with Rip Hunter, Rip is constantly pushing him to be, more in tune because of the fact that it's, he's Rip's dad and doesn't know this. Yeah. But Rip is constantly pushing him to be the person that he knows his dad will be, which is something that I really love in the father-son relationship because he can't reveal that to Booster. He's there, he's nurturing him and guiding him in the direction that he knows that he needs to go. Yet Booster really has very few outlets for validation because Rip always seems to be criticizing.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always like, about that relationship between the two of them is I do think of that moment in time when the adult Rip Hunter, it's time for him to go back and start the training of his father. I want to see that moment where right when Rip's like, okay, it's time for me to go. I've learned everything I can from you, Dad. It's time for me to go back and teach you. I want to see, that's a moment in time I would love to see. Just because what does Booster tell his son? say, hey, this is how I was back then. This is, and you're the guy who makes me the man I am today. That interaction is going to be a neat moment, I think.
And we're starting to see more and more of those elements, like Time Masters Vanishing Point, number 2, which I'll put in the show notes as well. There's some great moments where we see a very young Rip Hunter with his dad. And Dad's and not telling what you're saying, and I totally am with you. I want to see that eventually. But I like this slow build that we're starting to see more and more of their history together. What was Booster like for Rip when Rip was a little kid? And we're seeing, talk about a maturity. A very calm, very confident, a very mature Booster with his son Rip. And I like seeing those moments, just little tidbits of them. I don't know that I necessarily want to see all that fed to me right now. I want to see it too, what you're saying, but I'm enjoying this ride and this journey right now for a lot of the reasons you're echoing right there, because it's fun to see the two of them grow gradually to that point. And I do hope it does the end game, that this goes on a long time, and we do see that eventual, like, this is how it happened. This is how it came about. But it is kind of fun right now to have that question mark of, like, how does he get to this point? I also really liked talking about validation before I jump back into Generation Lost and in Time Masters. Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, really hard on Booster Gold in that series. Like, he came back through time with them, but he's really harsh on him in that. And there were moments where, like, I totally get it, but it is funny how, knowing what we know about Booster, it takes a lot for me to get mad at Hal. I was really mad at Hal during those sequences, and yet I didn't feel there was anything that Hal was doing that was out of character. I thought Hal was being Hal, and that was really great writing by Jurgens there, because when I was reading those sequences, I'm like, Hal's totally in character, but I want to punch him. I really want to punch him right now, and I want to tell him, you idiot, don't you know what this guy's been doing? Which is a very different relationship with Booster than I've had before. Because I read JLI, I loved JLI, but it was, Booster was, a lot more, there's a humor element to him, and it was... The joke with Booster and the fun with Booster was that fact that you knew, like, Booster was kind of out for himself in the MO. You knew there was a hero in there, and you got to see those moments. But he had that Guy Gardner element as well that Guy had back in that time, where underneath, that Booster Gold thing that he does, you knew there was the heart of a hero in there somewhere, but you saw it rarely a lot of times.
It was buried deep inside the materialism and the glory hound. So I definitely see what you're saying.
And I love that about the series. But back to this. Imagine knowing a major secret about a villain being alive. Imagine that secret could alienate you from everyone who doesn't know he's alive. The team infiltrates Checkmate dressed as Rocket Reds in their quest to prove Max is alive. At this stage, there is a fear of what he's up to due to his previous attempts to destroy all metahumans. Checkmate is at this really cool, interesting stage. I really miss that book. And to see the new White King and the old Black King trying to rebuild is something that I would like to follow further. I know they said Sasha Bordeaux is no longer with Checkmate, but I do hope she pops up in the DCU at some point. I've really enjoyed her interactions with Mr. Terrific in the past, and she is somebody who I want to see her have a continued life beyond all of this, because she's a character who, from her time in the Bat books to Checkmate to now, I want to see her somewhere, and I'm hoping somebody finds a good use for her. I did like the stealth aspect of the infiltration when they're discovered. They try not to use their powers, even then, to avoid discovery of their real identities. When Rocket Red runs into trouble, there's this very cool heroic moment for him. And I do love that he is earning the respect gradually of various members of the team post his initial comic relief moments, because he's starting to grow on me too. Then Fire's identity is revealed in those bits. But it is funny how, like, as this is great character development throughout this, not just of the core team that we're familiar with, but of new characters, like this new version of Rocket Red coming in there, are characters that I'm really enjoying. Now, you haven't read, how much JLI have you read, Jim?
Whenever a hardcover comes out, I pick it up.
Have you read it, though?
Yeah, I've read them.
Oh, okay, so you've actually, how many, read a couple of hardcovers? Or?
I think we're up to 3 now.
Okay, so you've read all 3?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're into the JLI then?
Yeah, you're definitely into the JLI, and it was, part of my like of Booster, just my development of who Booster is and that kind of, and I just like, okay, I want to see this. And then when I picked up the first one, I was like, oh, this is a really cool story. And I just, kept diving right into JLI. So that's why I'm really enjoying Generation Lost going back to it's, we always say like with bring the band back together, but this time the band is back together, but it's a little bit twisted. It's a little bit off kilter from what it was before. We got Booster, who is really a serious superhero now, even though he's not playing it. We got Rocket Red, who is hardcore old school Russia, which I kind of like that. I thought that was kind of a neat way to change his character around. And just as you got Ice, who's really doesn't want to be there, but she's kind of stuck. You got the new Blue Beetle filling in for the old Blue Beetle. I think this is just a cool story that I'm enjoying, especially because I have somewhat of a connection to that original JLI team. So I'm definitely, I'm sitting here as you're talking, I'm like nodding my head going, yeah, I see what you're saying, and I'm digging it as well.
The extraction by Captain Atom and the politics of checkmate, letting them go because they wanted to avoid drawing more negative attention to the organization. That was really well handled. They are currently under fire from the government due to questionable practices, and they would want to avoid adding to that issue. This didn't sit well with the Black King, but yet he had to go along with it. This is a fantastic use of checkmate, and it really added to this issue. I love the fact that we got some development of that core group because of their tie with Maxwell Lord and just the DC Universe in general, and I'm hoping we continue to see more of checkmate in the DC Universe after this.
Now, let me ask you a question, because here's something I thought maybe could have happened, but I'm not like locked in on saying it must be the case, but what if really that was Max Lord's manipulation of the thing? It's really Max's idea for them to stand down, for them not to follow the team, for them not to do, not to go after, and that's what he fed into the White King, saying, this is why you're not going after them.
I wouldn't be surprised. I kind of see that both ways. I could see it being what the White King said is, at face value, what it was really meant, but yet I think a lot is going to depend on, the cliffhanger in the issue is him talking with him, having this moment with Fire, and they're going to have a conversation. I so hope we get that conversation, because I'm dying to hear Max speak at this point and learn a little bit more of what he's up to and what he's going to try to tell Fire, because we've gotten tidbits of it with Booster. So where is he going from here? I don't know. I'm going to be very curious to see. The heroes, and you talked about Ice before, having some real trouble dealing with the fact that they're renegades. I want this over. I want to go home. This would be terribly difficult. To the outside world, they're renegades. Now, here's the question, kind of going off of the direction that you're saying. Did Maxwell Lord make them renegades on purpose to move them into position for whatever he's up to? I think that there's a lot to be told yet in this story, and I'm not taking anything at face. So, and to answer your question as far as, do I think that's a possibility? Sure. I'm not taking anything as set in stone right now, because I think there's going to be swerves galore coming in this whole thing, and I'm really enjoying this.
And I think, to answer your one question that you just said, I do think that they are renegades now because Max wants them to be renegades. He wants them to, one, need him to help them to clear their names, and to kind of like use that as a way to hold it over their heads, kind of a blackmail type deal. But also he's got an end game in mind. Maybe it's got to do completely with what the white light revealed to him as to his reason for being back. Maybe he wants to use the JLI for that purpose. I'm not sure what his end game is, but these are definitely Max Lord treating them like chess pieces.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the question is, does he have a noble intention or not? Because he did originally, theoretically, if you look back at historically, he thought he was doing the right thing for humanity. He thought his manipulations were better for people in general. Now, talk about this, he was kind of more like Earthman than anything else, but he really did believe that he was doing the right thing. And he wasn't, but that's neither here nor there. So I don't know. I'm deeply enjoying the story and curious to see where it's going to go from here and how these heroes are going to react to it. And here's the other question: is what happens if whatever Max throws on the table for them, they have to work with him? I'm not saying that he forces them. What if the situation does? What if there's things we don't know yet that these heroes are going to find out, and Max, whatever Max lays out on the table, they have to become his JLI again because of whatever's going on. What happens then? I don't know. I've been pondering that.
Oh, definitely. And there's definitely room for that to happen, and that's something I'm really liking about the way this story is playing out. And it's funny because this and Brightest Day have such different, feel and vibe to what's going on, but they feel connected because everything is going on under this Brightest Day banner, but they have such different feels to what's going on in each of the characters, the different heroes, the way they're perceived, the way they're being perceived, the way they're looking at the threat going out there. It's something that I'm really liking about these two, offsetting stories.
Yeah, which has been really great. It's been an awesome series. I actually really like that this seems to mirror, this is mirroring Brightest Day. Brightest Day comes out one week, this comes out the other week.
Yeah.
And I love these little events. It's a good book. It's funny how there's that teaser in the back of the issues right now of Batman with the Justice League International and saying there's 2 clues in the story of what's to come next. Are we going to get a Justice League International again? Or is that a clue that the band... See, that has me wondering, is the clue that the band's got to get back together with Maxwell Lord in order to do whatever they're going to do? Or is it a clue that after this, the end result's going to be that we are going to get a Justice League International again? I don't know. I'm just... It's interesting to me to kind of look at that perspective and see where things are going to go. But I wonder what it means to have Batman up there. And which Batman is that?
Yeah, I don't know.
So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting to me. Jim, one book you mentioned in the email, we shot an email to each other last night and talked about some books that we might want to discuss today. And one of the ones you mentioned that I literally just read it last night, and I'm kicking myself for not reading it in my first initial grouping, like in the first night. Our Army at War, featuring Sergeant Rock. This is written by Mike Martz, and it's a one-shot. It's part of these series of one-shots that are going to be coming out. I think there's 4 or 5 of them that are coming out that are in the, kind of thematically going back to these classic books. And this is great because it goes back to a much earlier time in wartime DC Comics, and, where Sergeant Rock was running around, and then goes to modern day. And, touches on things such as 9/11. And it's interesting to kind of see these stories, how I love how the panels kind of trade back and forth and pages trade back and forth between different time eras. But then it does that cool little bleed-through technique where things that one main character is saying bleed into things that the modern-day main character is saying and then bleed back into things. So they're touching on the same thematic things. Both of them are away from home. Both of them have left a loved one behind. There's some cool reveals along the way. Like with one, you get the impression that like this is either someone they're married to or engaged to, or something like that. But then throughout the story, it begins to gradually branch off and veer off, where you start to realize that the one is engaged, and the other one is suffering a great loss because of 9/11. This person was actually in the Twin Towers, and that's why this person is over, in Iraq and doing what they're doing. And it's interesting to see the different perspective. But then to find out at the end that the two characters were related, it was such a neat way that this story kind of started off together and mirrored each other, and you didn't realize there was a deep connection between these two characters until the very end. And yet their stories were so deeply interconnected with the same type of emotion. I really love this because it was great character pieces on two characters that I really didn't know. Because I knew Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, but it really was... We were journeying along with these characters and interacting with them as they met Sergeant Rock. We weren't following Sergeant Rock per se. And I loved this kind of way of addressing these characters and kind of giving us a little insight into what it'd be like to run into Easy Company.
Oh, yeah. This was one of those great just Army/war stories. And this is one of the ones that I was like, man, this was just a really impressive piece for me. One of the things that I found with various writings, with movies, TV shows, that the creative forces behind it can fall into a trap where they have a definite agenda and they They really shine that agenda out there. And it happens, both sides do it. You get some who are making like basically military propaganda piece where they're saying, yeah, we're here to save the world. And then you have the other side that's like, oh, this is, just an evil, dark, it's blood for oil man kind of deal, where you get both extremes where they really have their pieces and they're doing their, their way to tell what they think. This story for me is really not is not one of those type of stories. This is a good Army story. It's a good war story. It's a good, military type story. And, you can see kind of a anti-war type sentiment, but it's not a particular war. It's the war as a concept. Just what the damage that war can do, what damage it can do to the individuals back home, overseas, what it does to the people who fight in it, who survive, that kind of dealings, and just really kind of in depth into what the soldier goes through. And that was something that I really enjoyed about this, especially as you mentioned with the side-by-side storytelling where we jump from World War II to Iraq. Even the Pearl Harbor invasion had that great two-panel spread, two-page spread where it shows, the towers, but also had that great panel, that great page where the Japanese planes are flying into Pearl Harbor. I thought just usage of art, usage of the stories, just telling this overall emotional and just physical reaction, I thought was just a great piece. And that's why when I read this, I put it down. And this wasn't a Thursday read, by the way. This was one of those I read a little bit later because I'm like, oh, okay, I'll get to it. It looks kind of neat. When I picked it up, I liked the basic concept. I'll kind of see what happens. Right after reading, I was like, oh my God, I got to talk about this just because I had so many emotional reactions. I had enjoyment of it. Like you mentioned when we got to see Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, and we got to see Captain Duncan and the Gods of War. I was like, oh, this is some cool stuff here. We each have our own era and our own time, type of, they even make reference to, I thought G.I. Joe, wasn't real kind of deal when we see the Gods of War. I was like, yeah, that's, I could see a modern military kind of having this type of style. This is their mercenary type working with the U.S. military over there. I was like, I really enjoyed seeing just the different eras having the different types of quote-unquote G.I. Joe heroes.
One of the things I really like, too, is talk about Captain Duncan. I liked when he was told off because he made a crack about Janet, being on the butt of the rifle. And at the time when I did I read this twice. In my initial read-through, that read very differently than when you know that Janet's dead.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know that in the first read-through. Because I thought there was going to be parallels all the way through in both of the stories, and it wasn't until the end that I realized where things veered off. It was so great to read it through again and look at those sequences and understand where his emotion was coming from. And I thought it was great that the story could be read on different levels coming back through again. This was a really neat read, and this is one I will remember for quite some time. The artwork is absolutely breathtaking in this one. Like that close-up shot of Sergeant Rock. Because we just received intel on where that ambush came from, and not even the hounds of hell could keep us from taking it straight to him. But you see the determination on his face, and it's all Sergeant Rock on that page. It's kind of a nice little spotlight on that classic, iconic character. And the artwork really just, and I got to actually not just the pencil work and things like that, but I got to give props to the colors, because it's Ego is the colorist on this one, and just the tones and the shading, it's just, you felt like he was going into what could possibly be his last battle, is kind of more where I'm going with this. And that's something to me with a soldier, anytime they're going into something like this where we're talking about taking it straight to them. For any soldier, when they're in those situations where they're going to be heading into a skirmish, there's always the chance, not even the chance, there's very strong possibilities that somebody's not coming home. And we saw that in this. We saw members of Easy Company fall, which is how they got hooked up with these characters to begin with. Yet to see the Sarge find the strength within him to have that determination, there was something in that panel, I just saw it differently because of what we saw leading up to that. And it struck me in a way that's, and I'm not even putting it into words quite the way that I'd really like to, but there was something emotionally that got to me and added to my respect of soldiers and what they go through on a daily basis. Whether you're going in a skirmish or not, just being there being in that place, being away from home, and having to face these situations where you don't know if you're going to get bombed next or what's going to happen based on where you're going, the risk to your life, and yet finding that determination to press on. And whatever it is that brings that determination was something, it just added a respect level to me of not just that character, but of military people in general and what they have to go through because of the fact that we saw losses of members of Easy Company. And Easy Company to me, when you hear that group, it sounds like, a family. It sounds like something, that's a tight-knit group to me. And I think of those characters as being together and then seeing that loss and how people are brought into Easy Company because of the fact that they happen to be there and they can fill those ranks again because of losses, just made me see Easy Company in a different way and added more of a respect for how hard it must be to be a part of any military group and see your comrades fall and start building some new relationships with these new people that are coming in and trying to press on with those feelings still there. It was an interesting, just a different perspective for me because I've never been in that situation and it's not something I'm ever going to experience. So it's interesting to see that kind of, handled with such respect to those type of characters. And I thought it was cool.
Oh yeah. Amen on that. And it's funny. My next door neighbor just got back from Iraq. And he's a reservist, and he was over there, and he finally got home. And I wasn't here when he got home, but my dad was. And my dad's just telling me when he came in, he was just like, he was hooping and hollering that he was home. And he's like, I'm home now. And he actually even kind of hugged the tree that's in his backyard, kind of. It was just that, yeah, I'm back. And you just got to feel the earth underneath you. And like when my brother came home, this last time, my family was there, for the, my mom and dad, and they were there for the homecoming. And it's hard to explain emotions that get raised in those circumstances. And it's when I read a story like this, and you're talking about how you were having a hard time explaining what you were feeling when you were seeing Sergeant Rock, I was completely nodding my head because throughout a lot of this, throughout this, most of the story, I was like going, yeah, because we'll never really know. We've never really been through that, and we can only imagine. And even sometimes the imagination isn't good enough to know. And the one thing that in this comic that really, really got to me, and I gotta admit, I got choked up when I read it. Mm-hmm. When I think about it now, when I talk about it, I get choked up thinking about it. It's the big at the ending where we see how she died, and she not only died in the towers, she died because she jumped to avoid being burned alive. And when I first started hearing those stories of people who did that, I was shocked is not a word that can accurately describe it. And I don't even know if there's even a word that's been created that could truly express the emotional response I have and I still have when I think about that. It's a shock, it's a sorrow, it's a pain, it's just this unbelievable wow. And automatically I immediately think, what if I was in that situation? Would I do that? Would I be able to do that? And knowing the fact that the people who had that choice, who had that thing, and they only had basically like a heartbeat to make it in. It was one of those split-second things. The flames were kicking out. They were either going to stay there and burn to death, or they were going to make a jump for it and pray, or make a jump for it and hope that would be less painful than dying. I don't know what was going through their mind. I can never truly even imagine what could have gone through their minds. And you think about that, then you start thinking about what their family's feeling, what their family's thinking, and what this poor kid went through. I feel so... I hurt for this character. He would have been up there with her, but he forgot his inhaler, and he had to go back and get it, so that delayed him. You hear stories all the time that came out when 9/11 of people who just barely missed dying, who just barely missed not being there. Someone calls in sick that day, or they missed a connection, or they were doing something else, like, I'll go in, and it's one of those things that you're just like, wow. This is one of those books that it brought out that emotional response in me. And I was just like, my God, this was just a great piece on this.
And what I liked about it, exactly what you're touching on. I didn't have family members who were there, who were in the buildings. So I'm not going to pretend that I understand what people went through that did. But I think one of the nice things about pieces like this when they're handled in this way is they make you feel for those people who did. They make you say, wow. This was handled, I thought, with such respect of so many different elements, not just the Twin Towers, war and being in the battlefield and what it's like and fighting for somebody and fighting for the memory of somebody. All of these different elements I thought were handled with such respect that I just found myself respecting a whole bunch of things that I've never experienced before. And that's something where I thought that it was, when I walk away from something feeling like I felt good at the end of this issue, just in the sense that I felt like I had an emotional connection to things in a story that I felt like it didn't get preachy, because I think sometimes when you do that, you lose something as well. It just told a good story that lets you on your own. I think sometimes when it gets preachy, you don't internalize it. You don't own it. It's somebody else feeding it to you. This story didn't do that. This story gave you enough that you could, on your own inside, own those feelings and emotions and do with them what you will. And I think that's the sign of a good story.
I thought it was going to be an interesting read, maybe kind of neat. I did not expect the emotional reaction I got from it. I'm getting emotional here. Hold on. It's...
I got yeah. Where's your yeah? I'm with you. I understand. I know exactly where you're going.
You know what I'm saying.
No, exactly. I mean, that's the whole point of what this story was and why we're even talking about this one.
About this.
Yeah.
I'm not being the most articulate of the senseis, but it's...
No, it's actually one of the things when you said you wanted to talk about this piece, and I'm like, oh, no, I'm totally with you. I'd love to talk about this. It was funny how after this, I loved how the piece was very self-contained, and I'm glad they went that route. But it made me feel afterwards that I want to read more of this kind of story. Like, I'm excited for the other one-shots now.
Yeah.
And I'm very sad that, like, this cast of characters, I'm not going to get to follow further.
Right.
Because I would like to read more with them. They're interesting. And I'm not just talking about Sergeant Rock and, the captain. I'm talking about the two characters that were introduced in this. I'm like, I would like to follow more of what where does this guy go from here? And I'd love to see more of that. So that was an interesting story for me. Want to talk a little Green Arrow? Go in a little bit of a different direction?
Oh, sure.
Green Arrow number 3. Ollie was saved by the forest, which we talked about. We kind of assumed that was going to happen. But here's my question now. Did the forest kill him? Because we see this dark shadow looming around him. Is that what came after him? Is that what shot him?
Oh, big time. That's got to be, that's that same, black arrow firing, and just that's, the dark side of Ollie, or the dark side of the white light power manifesting its version of Ollie, or the unknown entity, dark. I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm like, oh, this is getting good. Is
it residual energy from the Blackest Night or some other darkness? Is this like the dark version of Ollie from Blackest Night? Because it was an archer who did it. So I part of me wondered, is there a connection, a deeper connection to Ollie, in that it's some form of residual energy from that?
I don't think this is residual energy from Ollie's Black Lantern. I think this is residual dark energy, or maybe it could be kind of like that yin and yang kind of thing. You have this white light that is that forest, so there must be an offsetting darkness, and this is that darkness, and it just generated an archer to kill Ollie just because, one, how else what would be a great way to kill off Ollie Queen but to use another arrow to kill him by an archer?
But J.T. Crew wrote that issue where Ollie was the Black Lantern. And he was playing a lot with the dark side. I mean, that was a very dark Ollie in that Black Lantern. So I'm not saying I'm 100% sold that's what it was, but I was thinking back, I'm like, wait a minute, this guy wrote that issue. So are we going to bring elements of that back into this, and are we not done with that exploration yet? I don't know. But I can totally, like what you just said, I can totally see that too, but part of me kept wondering, I'm like, well, we got the writer here who wrote that, and he opened up a lot of can of worms there, so are we seeing more from that? I don't know. It's just speculating. And I do think to myself, is it some other darkness that's in there? I love the water effect in the White Lantern symbol as he came up out of the water. Mm-hmm. With Ollie being such a crusader of the people, it is interesting to see that Queen Industries took over the relief efforts with regards to medication, and yet little is being done. People who have lost almost everything, and this isn't Ollie obviously in charge of the company anymore, but people who have lost almost everything would resent those that are embracing excess, especially when it comes to government funding contracts that are supposed to benefit people whose money is now lining corporate wallets. And that was interesting to see this exploration in here as well, which to me is it's getting to the deep roots of some of the best Green Arrow stories are when he does become a champion of the people who are being wronged in this type of light. Do you think that this is the true Galahad? Because his head's cleared now, supposedly. Do you think it is?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'm hoping this is the true Galahad. Yeah, I love this. Part of me thinks this probably isn't the true Galahad.
Part of me's thinking that too, but...
Yeah, but I want it to be. I really want it to be the true Galahad, but I don't know. Well, you never know what's going to happen in the DCU, but part of me just can't let go of the fact that this is probably just some crazy guy. But hey, you know what? How sane is Ollie? How sane is Batman?
And what exactly did they clear out of his head?
Yeah.
We learn more of the mysterious woman who's taken over Queen Industries, how her affair with Ollie's dad messed with her mentally, how she built up her own fantasy of entitlement, thinking this is what he wanted her to do all along, how this company was supposed to truly be hers. And it's funny how people develop these survival skills where they develop a fantasy that's so realistic to them that they're so convinced that they were something more and that they know deep down that these are the messages he was really sending me when he was being mean to me. And it shows how twisted people can become. And there was something I connected with. I'm like, wow, there's a creep factor in this because it feels very realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm digging her. I'm really liking her. The more backstory we're getting out of here, the more I'm understanding just how messed up in the head she is. Originally, I was thinking, you know what? I'd kind of like Ollie to go back to being head of Queen Industries. I like him having the financial background, the backing, to make his fancy arrows, to do all the arrow car and the aeroplane and just that kind of stuff. But I'm seeing where they're going with the company. I'm seeing where they're going with her. I was like, oh, this is not just going to be done in one story arc or even 2 or 3. She's going to be around for a while. She's going to be in for the long haul. And I'm really digging where they're taking Ollie. I was upset with the breakup of the marriage. I liked Team Arrow concept. I was hoping Speedy would stick around and just all the different players who were in the Green Arrow family, but seeing where they're going with this, either where they're going with with Ollie and his state of mind, seeing they're adding in my buddy Galahad, I'm like, yeah, this is like, okay, we're gonna get a team concept, but we're gonna get one that's fitting inside this weird little mystic white light, star forest, that kind of has some mystical and or supernatural boundaries to it. So, yeah, this is a definite cool story as it's developing, as it's playing out. I'm like going, oh yeah, I'm into this now.
Do you secretly think that Molly Queen is hunting down Ollie, or is that... Is that who the black is? It's Molly Queen?
Yes, that is Molly Queen.
The shifting of the seasons and the idea that time and nature are not totally natural here in the forest was a really nice build. I'm looking forward to seeing how JT Krull moves Ollie forward with this. I can tell he's trying to make the character grow past recent hardships and how the journey's going to be pretty tough. It's not going to just be bam, this is where Ollie is. There's going to be, he's going to have to earn it. And those are always journeys that are fun to take because I feel at this point Ollie does have to earn it back. And I love stories of redemption in this type of circumstance. And there's something I feel at this point that Ollie needs that because he's gone pretty far, and so we need to see that at this point. I think in order to kind of rally behind him again. This book, I'm enjoying this book 3 issues in though.
Oh, definitely enjoying it. And the funny thing is, when they did do the relaunch, I kind of questioned why they were doing it. I'm like, why don't you just continue on with the numbering sequence? I now see and understand why they went with the relaunch. It does make a little bit more sense to me too, because this really is a big change. This is a kind of, and it's a rebuilding, but it's also a redefining. It is him finding who he is kind of deal. So I understand and I back the renumbering sequence. Starting back over at 1 again.
Can we talk a little bit of Action Comics number 892 that had that Superboy backup in it?
Oh, yeah.
This effort by Paul Cornell, Pete Woods, and crew has been very entertaining. Lex is a character who's been very underground with regards to society as a whole. I'm talking about the public. since his fall in Superman Batman years ago. This big change post the War of the Superman is that he's managed to get himself back at the top of his company and is now reminding us as readers why he's always been such a power player. And that's something I'm finding incredibly engaging.
Yeah, I definitely am liking this Lex Luthor we're seeing. He's got a little bit of the tainted of the orange ring in him. You can see kind of still that little bit of greed above and beyond what he was before, but there is still that solid who is Lex Luthor. And this has been this is a fun, cool story. This is a great Lex Luthor story, and I hate to say this, but I'm not missing the fact that Superman isn't in Action Comics. It was, when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, Lex Luthor's story would be cool, but I was thinking in my head, I'm probably going to miss seeing Superman. I'm not missing it. I'm seeing, I'm getting told a great story that, it's not only holding my interest, it's drawing me in even further into a character I already liked before. As much as you can like a villain as nasty as Lex, but I liked him before, and I'm getting pulled in more, and I'm like, yeah, this is a cool story. I want to see where this goes to the end.
You gotta wonder if Superman's walkabout isn't allowing this to happen in many ways. Like Lex to continue to rise to power even more, because Clark's off doing other things, if maybe this isn't allowing this opportunity, which I think is interesting to a certain extent.
I'll definitely think the fact that Clark's not around is kind of giving Lex a little bit more power, a little bit more kind of like, I don't want to say permission to do what he's doing, but it's kind of like that type of deal where he doesn't have the big blue to keep him in check. He doesn't really have to worry about, and not that he really worried about Superman, but he would have to be a little bit more cautious if Clark was around. Clark's not around. He's able to kind of flex his power, able to pursue some of his stuff, and I like, seeing that.
It's actually kind of neat because if with the way Grounded's going, you figure by the time all that's done, or at least by the time this Lex story's done, we're going to be ready to see Superman come back and start confronting Lex. And Lex will have been built up to the point where that'll feel real good. It won't be just like, bam, look, Luthor's back. It'll be, we've journeyed with Lex coming back. Now we see him as this compelling person. What is it going to be like when he confronts Superman? I totally agree with you. We're totally in sync that I'm glad that they aren't ignoring his time as an Orange Lantern and they're embracing it. He touched that power during Blackest Night. He understands that the power is given by those who are touched by the emotional spectrum. And he's seeking out, these leftover artifacts, I guess you could call them, from the Blackest Night. Mm-hmm. He ultimately wants to gather as much power as he can for his own purpose. And is this a need to gather knowledge and power that we've seen from Lex in the past? I feel, to a certain extent, it's also enhanced by his time with Larfleeze's power, which I'm really liking. The reveal of the Lois robot early on was great. Yeah. Lex's reasons for having her not only as a form of security, but as an anchor / more so devil's advocate makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I tell you, that the Lois robot is one of those characters that I'm wondering how much of Lois is in there, how much of... there's more to her than what we're seeing. We've already seen that in, with his dreamscape, his dream reality when he was dealing with, Mr. Mind, that she has a deeper role to him than just this, bodyguard, this something he can bounce ideas and information off of. There's going to be more that's going to come out of this, and that's where I'm wondering where that story arc's going to go. We got multiple stories going throughout this. We got Lex in his pursuit of power. We got Lex in pursuit of the Black Lantern power. We got the Lois robot. You got Slade in the mix, so he's always going to add a little tweak and a twist to any story just because who he is. So, and then eventually Clark's going to get back into the story. This is one of those things where they're building nice layers, of a future story that's going to come out, and it's going to drop like a hammer.
Back to the power, Lex is dealing with dangerous forces. His whole search party, including Deathstroke, almost succumbed to it. Now, is Grodd controlling the black energy, or is he being controlled by it? And it was kind of an interesting little twist there, and I'm kind of more feeling like Grodd is manipulating it, but sometimes when you manipulate forces you don't understand, it manipulates you. So I'm curious to see what actually is going on there. It was a great cliffhanger, because it was a perfect time to kind of see another player be introduced and to see an adversary for Lex, because right now, at first Deathstroke seemed to be that adversary, but that quickly changed.
Yeah. And I'm thinking the Power is manipulating Grodd. I think Grodd thinks he's in control. He thinks he's got the juice and the power, but reality, it's going to be the darkness that's controlling Grodd, which is a pretty spectacular feat if you think about, because his mind powers, not only his mind powers, his intellect is allowing something to be controlled. Because when the Power kind of reached out and tried to take control of Lex, he wouldn't give up his intellect. He wouldn't give up the control over himself. And I thought that was a cool thing to see him fight that discipline. We're going to get a battle of wills, a battle of mind coming down, whether it's between Lex and Grodd and the Power, or the Power, or complete triangle. Who knows what we're going to get? We're going to get a nice little battle royal going on with all parties fighting for themselves.
I want to talk real quickly about the Superboy co-feature. Jeff Lemire is so awesome. Bye, Sweet Tooth. I am very into the idea of a Superboy solo series. Bye, Sweet Tooth. Piers Gallo and Jamie Grant are great on art. Bye, Sweet Tooth. I was glad to see that this will be a continuation of the development we saw in Adventure Comics. Bye, Sweet Tooth. Simon in particular was a character, Bye, Sweet Tooth, that I wanted to see more of. And I'm glad he is like Luthor when we first see him. Bye, Sweet Tooth. But his intelligence, even though it's Luthor-like, he seems to be like this ally to Superboy. Will that relationship stay? Bye, Sweet Tooth. I want to learn more of the secrets of Smallville, and I love that, Bye, Sweet Tooth, in the TV show of Smallville, the idea that there's this rich history of the town to be explored, this idea of an underground with what appears to be supernatural elements, it's interesting. Is this natural, or is there magic to it? And I'm glad to see his cohorts in the Teen Titans and the Phantom Stranger for a cameo. I have high hopes for this new series due to how fantastic. There's this down-home feel, albeit post-apocalyptic, work in Sweet Tooth, but Jeff Lemire's been battling high for me lately because I love the way his stories, he really gets to the heart of characters, makes you care about them. Like, Sweet Tooth is a character that I really care about. I see him doing the same thing for Connor. It does feel very thematically like it's a continuation of where Adventure Comics left off, which I was loving so much what Jeff Johns and Francis Manapul were doing with that, and this felt very much in that vein, and it is something where all joking around, I love Sweet Tooth. I love what Jeff Lemire's doing, and to see him on this book, he really gets what makes Connor an interesting, fun character, and what made that Adventure Comics run so cool. I was sad to see that run come to an end when it did, because I wanted to see more of those stories, and it looks like we're now going to be getting that, because this felt very good. I don't know, what did you think?
Well, one, subliminal messaging, Sean, is supposed to be a little bit subtler than that. Just so you know, in future, you want to just slightly, downplay it. But
what are you talking about?
Exactly. No, yeah, I definitely really enjoyed this backup, and I'm looking forward to the Superboy story. It had just that. The one moment I loved was the Crypto moment. Yeah, I want to see more about who and what is Crypto, what's going on, his mindset.
Jim, Crypto's a dog.
What?
Crypto's a dog.
Is he? Are you sure?
No, I'm totally kidding aside. It's that picture moment where he grabbed the picture from Ma Kent. There's this whirlwind going around, and her picture flies out of her hand. It was a moment with her and Clark. And Crypto caught it in his mouth and, brought it back to her. And I'm totally with you. I love those moments. I'm glad to see him being used more, and I hope he's a regular feature in this book. I can't imagine him not being it. I'm with you. And that added a charm to the story that I think worked.
Well, the picture that she snagged is her and Clark, but it looks to me like it's a Clark's birthday. He went to blow out the candles, and it was super breath because the cake, just splattered everywhere. Mm-hmm. And that was the picture. And I thought that was a cool picture in itself, that you have this moment of the young Clark's, powers just popping out of nowhere. But I love these moments where, Connor is like, Crypto, you go with Ma, stay with her, protect her. Understand? Roof. Just that, hoorah, you got your assignment, take care of it. And he's going to, and Crypto will die defending and protecting her. And I love those moments where you really just show the loyalty that is man's best friend, that is Crypto. I'm a cat person, I admit it, but I would love to have a dog like Crypto. I would, Crypto for me would be the one dog I would throw out my no dog rule for. I would throw out that and go with Crypto.
How are you on Boys with Antlers?
Well, we do have a deer head mounted on the wall. So, and we got a couple hides, and we got a couple, so that's how I feel about antlers.
Wow. Bye, sweet Bluetooth, but don't hunt them down. You'd be one of the bad people in this story.
All honesty, I don't think I could shoot something that could talk back to me. So I think Sweet Tooth would be safe. Now, but accidents do happen when you're in. When you see the antlers, you see the horns running through. Yeah, accidents can happen.
I'll remember never to wear antlers around you. Fair game. I really liked the Superboy co-feature. It was a nice introduction into the series, and I know it's the Jimmy Olsen one we're getting next, right?
Yes, I think so.
And that's where we're gonna. Is it next issue we see Chloe? I know it's definitely down the road. If it's not the next one, it's coming up. We get to see Chloe finally introduced into the DCU, so that's going to be fun as well. This book's good. I like this Action Comics right now. We talked a lot about Superman. We haven't really had a chance to touch on Lex Luthor and how we were feeling about Action. I wanted to make sure we talked about that.
Now I can get out of here.
Hi, this is Starwolf Oakley, also known as Bobby C. I'm just calling about your Batman Under the Red Hood show episode. And like I mentioned before, it was really Jim Starlin was the one who sort of turned Jason Todd into sort of the punk kid nobody really liked, because he personally never liked the idea of Robin. I believe he said in an interview, it sort of took him right out of the Batman mythos, even though he did write a very good Jason Todd in Batman the Cult, which you'll be reviewing soon. One element about Jason Todd and Tim Drake was that it does sort of seem odd in retrospect, and maybe even at the time, the idea that Tim Drake being the better Robin was also because he was also from a wealthy family, the same way Bruce Wayne was. It does sort of paint a rather unusual picture that somehow Tim's the better Robin because Tim was from a better social standing than Jason was. There's occasionally been, both in the past and currently with Jason Todd, the idea that he's from the streets, if you will, and they have sort of put the idea in universe that somehow, not in universe, but out of universe from a fan's point of view, like, did we really want to make a new Robin and Tim that was from a better class, as it were, than Jason was? It doesn't exactly paint the best picture, even though Jason originally, even from his post-crisis trying to steal the tires off the Batmobile, did have a more morality than he seemed at first. I've never read the stories themselves, but supposedly he had ideas that I don't want to steal, but it's the only way I can get enough money to eat. So anyway, I was wondering what you all thought of that, and I look forward to your review of Batman the Cult and see how Jim Starlin would use Jason Todd, even though it was a character that he didn't like and in his own way made other people not like, enough to start a whole thing where people wanted to see the Joker beat him to death. So thank you very much. You guys do a great job, and I might call again soon. Bye.
Hey, Bobby. It's interesting when you talk about the history of Jason Todd. It's been so many years since I've read some of the issues. I've gone back and read, some of the stuff pre-crisis. I've read actually the origin again, the renewed post-crisis origin, I should say, of Jason Todd again. And you're right, there was a morality to him. It is funny how he's one of those characters. I remember back when I was reading him, I kept comparing him to Dick Grayson. And that was where it led to me not liking him, because he wasn't Dick Grayson. And that's why I always wonder if over time, if maybe somehow, especially because I liked him so much in the Cult, if I wouldn't have warmed up to the character or not. It is interesting. And you're talking about how like Jim Starlin didn't like the Robin concept and things like that. I don't know, because back then I didn't read anything about that. I just read Batman, and I never followed that aspect of it. I really enjoyed Starlin's take on Batman. I loved his whole work and everything. But that's interesting if that was the case where he just didn't care for the Robin concept, and that's where that came from. I got an opportunity to talk to him. It was at a New York Comic-Con during a signing, and he was doing a little sketch for me. And I was chatting with him quickly about the whole thing, and I mentioned that the cult was the story that made me vote for Jason to live. And he mentioned again how close the voting was. So it is funny how, yes, that take on Jason Todd made people dislike him, but there were a lot of people passionate enough out of the people that called that it was a very close voting between the two characters, and really could have shifted either way, between voting for him to die and for him not to die. So it's very interesting when you look back at that story. But you're right, his concept of morality, especially considering that Tim, I don't know if what made Tim cool, at least to me as a reader, was that he came from an affluent background. For me, what made Tim interesting was the fact that he figured everything out. Tim's introduction was so cool for me in Lonely Place of Dying, because here was this kid who had studied Batman and studied Nightwing and figured out that why is Batman behaving the way that he was? Because Batman was in a very dark place at that time. He was drifting more into the darkness, and it was showing why he needed a Robin and how it, kind of brought him back into the light and grounded him. And just how having people around him, because my favorite exploration of the solo alone Bruce stories was the fact that here was this guy that when he shut himself off from the world and stopped trusting people, it had a negative effect on him. And I really liked that era, and I like that we've moved past that era now, because I think that's been done. But to see Bruce Wayne kind of gradually becoming more into... I like this idea of Batman Inc. coming up for this reason. The idea that when Bruce comes back now, that he's going to recognize that, hey, there's really a strong advantage to kind of expanding the franchise and taking a look at how can I be more effective, and, what leadership opportunities do I have here? And what opportunity do I have to really bring in strong resources? Dick Grayson at this point has been trained for so long to be not so much a successor of Bruce, but he's lived his whole life in a very similar lifestyle. Dick has outgrown the Shadow, and he brings his own skill set to the table. He looks at the world a little bit differently than Bruce does, and that's something that Bruce can use to his advantage. Dick's approach to Batman is very different because of it. I think that's something that's interesting. I loved what happened with Jason Todd and the direction that it led Bruce in, because it led him to some very dark places. It led for the opportunity for Tim Drake to be that guy that could show us why Robin's important again. But it was also because Tim was so clever. It wasn't about Bruce saving Tim. It was about Tim saving Bruce. Whereas with the Jason Todd scenario, it really was another attempt of Bruce to save somebody else. Tim brought something to Bruce, not the other way around. Now, granted, Tim got something out of it when he got the training and all that, but Tim was more self-made. And that was something that I found that was interesting. He went and did this training. We got to follow his training. We got to see him a lot more independent, especially in the Robin solo minis, which I thought were very cool. Robin 1, 2, and 3. Before he even had a solo book of his own, those little miniseries were really a great way for us to get to know what it was like to become a Robin at the ground floor. So there were some differences there. I didn't hate Jason. I voted for him to live. I loved Tim a lot more than I ever loved Jason. And I see drastic differences between Tim Drake and Dick Grayson. Yet, there's the similarities that are there are like you would imagine for any sibling raised by the same father figure. And Jason's the middle child, and we know it a lot of times happens historically with the middle child. Something goes horribly wrong. And so it is kind of funny how this has all turned out with Bruce's little mini family here. But I don't know. I find the whole thing very interesting. His morality is an interesting question. Because you're right, he had a morality. I can't comment too heavily on it because it's been years since I've read those issues, and I really need to take some time under the Red Hood And our discussion that we had on the show and a lot of your comments right now have gotten me interested in like cracking out the issues and really trying to make some time. And it's unfortunate I have to wait for a school break for me, I think, because, trying to keep up with things for the show, where I can really sit down and do some in-depth reading of those years where Jason Todd was Robin, and really to kind of sit down and look at his morality and what he brought to the table, kind of with a fresh perspective, because it's been so long for me that I've got one impression in my head, but it'd be nice to sit back and read the issues and actually see where this all came. I actually encourage people to do that. If you're interested in the character and where he came from, go back to the original source work. It's a great thing to seek out at cons and just, kind of get your Jason Todd history and fix there. But thanks for the phone call. It was very, very interesting. And please call again, and I recommend that for any listeners that have called before. I really love people who have a different take. Or can add something to our discussion. We've had some great discussion points recently. Actually, there's a Lantern Savage has a voicemail that's coming up in a little bit where he refers back to a voicemail, actually a couple of voicemails from other listeners, and adds his own 2 cents worth in. And I kind of like that this show has become an open dialogue that way. So please feel free to call in. Our show voicemail line for everyone is 1-440-388-4434 or drnorge on Skype. We actually pay for that, and one of the reasons why we do it is because we want you guys to be a part of the show. So that's something we pay for monthly to have that feature. And actually, we pay for the phone line, and we pay monthly to have that brought in because we want the opportunity for you guys to be there and be a part of the show. So please feel free to use it. If you got thoughts to get on the show, get them out there. We love having our listeners interact with us.
Great molecules! They're programming the computers for a chain reaction to blow up that atomic pile!
Jim, I know you mentioned to me that you want to talk about Emerald Warriors number 1, Green Lantern Emerald Warriors number 1. I was really excited for this with Tomasi writing, and it really kicked off with the type of personal character-driven story that I expect from Tomasi. Guy is one of those characters that I love to see evolve. The surface bravado always hides a much more complex individual, and I really enjoy when we see his street-smart analysis. The core is clearly not as black and white as it used to be, much less the universe. Blackest Night, Unjust Laws of the Guardians, Secrets Around Every Corner, Alpha Lanterns, etc. Guy is aware that there are things that have previously been hidden away and unexplored that can no longer be ignored. And I love that kind of kickoff to the premise of where a lot of this is going.
Oh, definitely. This has been this Emerald Warriors had what I like to consider like a side action. You have this cool, opening fight sequence with Guy where you really, get the bravado, you get the high action, bam, as he takes down the forest, a little bit of one-liners, a little bit of cool classic Guy moments. But as that's going on, there's still the rest of the story fleshing out. We're still getting these introductions of, with over in Daxam, we're seeing some more stuff with the Red Lanterns. We're seeing a little bit more of the political intrigue going on, and just this underlining down, of the opening story arc. But we're not losing it. It's not just a discussion. It's not just a lengthy kind of. We're still getting our pound. We're still getting our bang, but we're also getting the story layouts. And that was something that really impressed me about and really enjoyed about Emerald Warriors.
The hard part is he knows he has to go against what the Guardians are doing in some ways to move in the direction, that he's thinking of. They seem more concerned with protecting their way of life than doing the right thing. And I love how complex the GL universe has become because he's truly passionately in this, I've got to protect the core. I've got to do what's right for the core, which is interesting to see Guy in that role, but knowing that he needs to kind of step outside in order to do that. Guy also proves he's savvy in covering his tracks. He needs to stick to his pact with Ganthet and Atrocitus, but he also doesn't want the Guardians to know what he's up to. The mission with the scientists, from that other uncharted territory, give him a reason to explore it. They need to be proactive in light of recent situations where they were caught with their pants down, and it's clear that Guy is using this as a cover for his true motives, but it's a great way for him to operate under the radar in the area where he needs to be. So he's doing this with Guardian approval, but yet gets to kind of do what he wants.
Yeah, he's got his own little agenda in there, but it's your typical kind of subversive, resistant type movement. It's he's still being a bit of a renegade, but it's a renegade that's out in the open. He's not hiding in the shadows. He's out there, playing day, saying, "Hey, this is your assignment you gave to me." But in reality, he's got his own way he's going to look at that, and that was something I liked. as I said, I like seeing just the boom, the pow, the action, the high energy, but also just that nice little political intrigue kind of espionage type deal.
Which is the stuff I always liked from his one on Green Lantern Corps. So to see elements of that here, but used in a different way. Because we got the core book still going on. So it's great how he's like, let's see where we can go in this direction with it. Let's see what we can go over here. And it's great to see that there's this unexplored area of the Green Lantern universe that's just ripe for the picking. And I love the way that they've just really expanded upon the idea of the core and what you can do with these books. Because it's just rich and interesting. I was glad to see Ion, well, actually not really Ion anymore, Sodom Yat, back out of the Son of Daxam. I want to see more of the exploration of his relationship with Arisia. I don't know, is he going to be in this book, or was that just an opportunity to pull him out? I'm guessing if he was here, we're going to have some opportunity to see him here, right? Or I don't know.
That's what I'm assuming, but I didn't think he was going to, Sodom was going to be in this title. I didn't realize that. And that was something I was like, oh, cool. Is he going to be around here? Because I would assume he would be Green Lantern Corps, in that title, but who knows? I don't know. If they're introducing it here, I'm assuming he's going to stay here.
Agreed. Or, some of these characters, like, Atrocitus and things like that, we might see them pop up in different titles for different reasons. So I don't know that necessarily seeing him here means we're seeing him exclusively here. I don't know what this means. So we'll see.
The more we see Atrocitus has a functioning brain, the more I like this character.
Yeah.
When he's not just pure rage. Maybe some of the Red Lanterns are pure rage, but he has this functioning brain. He is able to think, plan, and whatnot. And I like seeing that in him. He's still very creepy and very okay, wow. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? He's definitely a bad guy, but he's a bad guy that they need right now. Is he going to turn on him? When is he going to turn on him? What's going to happen if and when he turns? There's all types of stuff that, he has his own agenda as well. We talk about Guy going off and doing his thing. Well, Atrocitus has his own other agenda, his own hidden and/or plus we're seeing a lot of it, but there's still more to it. There's stuff we don't know about him yet.
What about Bleeze? I mean, forgetting about Atrocitus just for a second, how long can she hold it together? She's there as Atrocitus' agent, but can she hold it together? You talked about how we get to see him with the more intelligent side from time to time. But will Bleeze be able to maintain that same control? Because their powers certainly don't allow for that. Plus the fact that Guy clearly is still having after effects from his time as a Red Lantern. What will being close to them do? Will that only enhance the situation? I don't know.
Well, he's still connected to the Red Lantern, and you would think that he would be able to pull that out of him, or I don't know if once you make that connection, maybe there's always that little subtle connection. You got the one scene where you see the Red Lantern logo in his eyes, and then later a little bit of blood's coming out of his mouth. So you get, there's still that connection. And I'm wondering, when you get Guy with Atrocitus in the same room, are we going to get more of that coming out? Is it just because Guy does have these hidden anger? He is angry at the core. He's angry at what he has to do to save the core, or is it just because of, he did, wear the ring one time?
For me, one of my favorite moments was the skull wall of Sector 666, which I like to call Red Lantern Legos. And if that's what they really are, I'd love to see the Star Wars version because they would make a killer Death Star. But it was like Atrocitus had this reminder. And I love that because it's a twisted sense of honor that's there. And taking the joking out of it, there was something that I appreciated, that sense of wow, it's something you don't expect to see from a Red Lantern. And you're right, I like seeing that it's not just one layer to the Red Lanterns. There's something more. And that's one of the great things about introducing this emotional spectrum and exploring these various characters. Each of the colors has so much more to explore, not just in one or two characters. We get to know more about now Atrocitus, more about Bleeze. But there's a whole bunch of other ones we can get to know over time. This has opened up such storytelling opportunities that it's just mind-blowing where they can go with this. Who is the big bad? How is he making the Lanterns seem Salak? And it appears they think they're arriving on Oa, but they're within the unknown sector? What was that?
I don't know. And I was hoping you would know. I was hoping when we talk about this guy, you're like, oh, that's so-and-so, so-and-so. He's a longtime Green Lantern villain that they just pulling in. I was hoping you would know because I'm looking going, who is that guy? I don't recognize him. And I'm like, dang, this guy's got some form of power.
I know who that is. It's Phil. Phil with the We. From way early on. He's controlling the whole world.
That's the new Wii joystick in his hand.
Azrael's going to kill him.
Sword.
Azrael's going to kill him, and there's going to be no religion.
Yeah. Well, you know what? He could be Voldemort. He's a parcel mouth, obviously, with all the snakes around him. What?
Voldemort? You mean from Harry Potter?
Yeah, from Harry Potter. The dude's got all the snakes around him, so he's got to be able to, be a parcel mouth, or
sure, sure.
That could be, Voldemort.
I'm sticking with he's Phil. That's Phil till I hear otherwise. Jim, you know what one book I'd like to talk about is Batman Confidential, number 48. This is one I am baffled that you weren't reading.
I know.
Batman, Superman dealing with voodoo, dark magic, vampires, zombies, werewolves. It was really interesting for Batman and Superman to deal with Superman's weaknesses here. This story isn't about Superman running away. It's about him having to adapt and think and operate differently. Batman is taken to a very difficult place here. He's all about control. What happens when he has to see the chinks in his own armor and has to work past them? And these are some really great character moments. Corto Maltese is a great setting for this. My favorite James Bond movie with Roger Moore was Live and Let Die. It's because of that whole Baron Samedi thing and the whole voodoo New Orleans setting. Now this takes rituals that we see in that much further, with additional supernatural elements, but I like the horror vibe here. Not just because it always feels good to see Batman overcome mental torment, because he does in this. Superman isn't often seen in this dark a setting. And it shows you what a hero he is and how he can adapt and doesn't lose his confidence in this setting. Anytime you see Batman overcome by illusions of his eyes and mouth sewn shut, that was the cliffhanger of the last issue. It's just plain creepy. Imagine having any of your senses stolen in such a horrifying manner and having to try and fight your way through that, fight past the illusion. Such an amazing moment. What worked for me was the voodoo supernatural style of adversary that even threw off the werewolf and the vampire who teamed with our heroes. Even though all four of these characters, there's like this tentative partnership between them, I liked that it felt like it was an uncomfortable partnership between all of them. Demeter the vampire and Liv, how this Demeter has to deal with the guilt of bringing her into this adventure, into this lifestyle. How making someone the same as you doesn't mean that they will embrace that. It often will drive you apart. It's kind of like the tragic romance. Superman and Batman have a different sense of morality than their partners in the vampire and werewolf. And even the vampire and the werewolf have an uncomfortable relationship in this because they come from different philosophies. All the beats feel great because it's very different. They're well-rounded characters put together in a way that doesn't lose any of what makes each of them who they are at a core. This arc really has a high recommendation for me for people looking for something a little bit different in a Batman and Superman story. It's from Batman Confidential. The art's by Tom Mandrake and David Barron. The story's written by Kevin Van Hook. I would love to see this done as a DC animated release to throw a little horror element into those original offerings, because it's something we saw a taste of that in the Spectre short, but I'd love to see like a full-blown one kind of play around with the whole horror route with these two characters. But it was, seeing Superman in this kind of setting and seeing him act and react and do something that's really outside of his comfort zone, yet make it work and show that he wasn't just going to sit on the sidelines because magic was his weakness. He would find other ways to adapt. Even when Batman told him to do otherwise, it showed why he is a major player and who he is and what he brings to the table. It's just a great story. And it's the end at issue number 48 of this arc. But this is something that I really like about Batman Confidential is the experimentation. I loved the series Batman Legends of the Dark Knight. Not every arc hit a home run. It just wasn't like that. But you would get arcs like this, where you'd see somebody who played around with something a little bit different. You're like, woo, that's cool. And I love seeing different creative teams get a crack at these characters and to get a chance to tell us something a little bit different. And Batman Confidentials, this was a good arc. I really, really enjoyed this one. It looked great, it read great, and it told me a story that was out of continuity, that you just felt it was very contained, nice little complete beginning, middle, and ending with some really cool characters. And it fleshed out the vampire and werewolf characters in such a way where you got to see them through Batman and Superman's eyes, and why they would be so disgusted with them. Yet you felt a little sympathy for those characters as well. So that's always fun, where you kind of can look at the story and read it again and kind of see it from a different perspective, depending on your taste. But it is something I was like, boy, I'm surprised Jim did not read this one because of the whole vampire and werewolf vibe. And it is something, dude, I do recommend when it's collected, do yourself a favor and pick this baby up, because it's good. It's up your alley.
See, I've had my headphones off this entire time, so I don't hear what you're saying. Yeah, I know that. It was one of the things after I made the decision, and then I started reading what it was going to be about. I was like, "Oh God, no, man!" But I was actually surprised. I stuck to my guns.
We'll see what happens when it's collected.
Oh, there's no ifs, ands, or buts on that. I'm jumping on that collection.
It is the sequel to the miniseries, Batman and Superman, Vampires and Werewolves.
Oh, okay.
Also by, I know Kevin Van Hook wrote that one as well. You don't have to look back and see if that was the same art team or not.
I'll be honest, I didn't read that. I didn't read the original one either.
Which I'm sure has got to be collected at this point.
Yeah, somewhere.
You didn't need to read that to understand this story, because it's been so long since I read that one that I really jumped into this one, and I didn't feel like I needed to go back and reread anything in order to enjoy this. They give you everything you need in this, so there was nothing. It's a brand new story, but it is set in that whole universe of them meeting up with these vampires and werewolves and having another adventure together again. They're kind of all through circumstance they're thrown together again, if that makes sense. Jim, you said you wanted to talk real quickly about Outsiders number 32?
Oh, yeah. Here's the thing with this. When Outsiders first came out and we had a new creative team, I know we were both a little bit kind of hesitant, and I even said I was going to give it a couple issues before I made any solid, definitive decision on it. Well, I tell you, this is the issue that where I was able to actually make a solid decision whether I really liked or disliked the Outsiders, where they're going with this.
Wait, can I say something? Can I say something before?
I'm digging this.
Can I say something before you say it? Because I think I'm gonna tell me if it's the same thing. Because I'm digging exactly what you're saying right now. Now it's the creeper bits, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Dude, man, the creeper bits, the Metamorpho, the Owlman story, those were kind of cool. They're going along nicely. Even the Geoforce stuff, it's, they're starting to build on it. The creeper bits so totally sold me on this. I'm like, I gotta see more, because this is a great tie-in to the Reign of Hell story arc, and they had a nice editor note just saying, hey, if you want to see the full story, here's where you get it. I thought that was a cool thing, but just seeing the Creeper deal one, just I never really liked the character too much, or not even liked, but never really had any type of connection with him. When they launched that limited series with him, where they're kind of relaunching the character, I picked up, I think, one issue, and I just I'm not feeling it, and I didn't really get all of that one. He was never really my tie-in to the Outsiders, especially this new team. Even with the previous, creative team that was writing him, I wasn't, connected. This gave me a connection to the Creeper. Really seeing him in action, seeing what he can do, how he can do it. I loved, the little funny one-liners, the little lines that got thrown out there, some obvious lines that they were going on. They threw out there, where, Creeper is basically against his own will being asked to being told he will repopulate the Creeper demons, and he's not going to live through it. And as soon as you heard the whole, he's not going to survive the process, the first thought that popped in my head is what's on the page, where a lot of guys, that's the way they'd want to go. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But it never lost the darkness, the creepiness. I'm going to keep saying creepy multiple times as I talk about it, but just that nature of hell and suffering and all that. It never lost that, but we still had these little funny one-liners. We saw Creeper, really play off of Segura, he played him nicely, used him to get free, used him then, did a nice beat down on him to scatter the other demons away from them. So he basically left with, she had nothing. She just basically let him go, but we know it's not over yet between the two of them, especially since she said it's not over between the two of them. But even if she hadn't said those words, there was no doubt in my mind we're going to see her again. She's going to go for round 2. Her werewolf friend, special mate, I don't know what exactly their relationship is, but he wants a round 2. He wants another fight. I thought that was just a great, great story. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool. And then at the end, we get his super agent does him a great favor. Hey, you're going to be our inside correspondent in Markovia. Like, I got to go back there.
And he's got to do that in order to keep his career going, because this is like his last shot. Because everything that's been going on lately has taken that from him. And I love, after everything we saw him through, the epilogue, when he's finally back in Washington, D.C., back where he wanted to get, he's done with all this, he's got to go back into that nonsense. I do like, I'm with you. I'm still uncomfortable with Geoforce. I'm not happy with him at all. But I'm enjoying this book.
Yeah.
But it's funny how I don't like Geoforce at all now. And he was, in The Outsiders, he's always been one of my favorite characters. So that's been my discomfort with this and yet I like what's being done with this book, because it's branching off of just the horrible things Geoforce has been through. So there is a storytelling reason why he's acting this way and why it all happened, which is working. So it's interesting how this story kind of is starting to work for me on that level because of it. So I'm digging that.
And Metamorpho, I'm starting to really get more behind him as well, because he's another character that I've read some stories there I thought were okay. I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of neat. I kind of liked the other. Oh God, what's the other Metamorpho?
Oh, Shift.
Thank you, Shift. I liked him a little bit better because I actually kind of saw his birth come about, in the earlier stuff, in the beginning of The Outsiders.
You almost saw some Creeper birth too.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
But he's another Metamorpho's a character. But I tell you, Geoforce, I see him coming around. I see, this team now. I'm starting to see that this team has the chance to jive and get connected together and actually become a team again. And I think this book is now definitely a Friday read. Could possibly be a Thursday if, depending on what else is in the stack, but it's definitely is a solid Friday read. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm liking this. I want to see where this is going to go. And I wonder if we're not going to get Freight Train, if he's not going to maybe, be a part of the team.
Oh, I don't think he's an accident. I think he's sticking around.
So that's another character. I'm like, okay, he's got some potential for a little bit of interesting factors going on here.
Jim, there's one other book I'd like to talk about real quickly, because we got to get ready to wrap up. But Freedom Fighters #1 just came out. This is a book I've been highly waiting for. I'm a big fan of Gray and Palmiotti, so I just tend to grab anything that they do. I adore Jonah Hex. I loved the first 2 Freedom Fighter minis, and this has been no exception. Well, the great thing about this is, out of the starting gate, you don't need to have read anything in order to get into this. They kick you off with a brand new story arc that, if you've read Freedom Fighters before, cool, you feel at home with the characters, but they introduce right away what's going on. That opening sequence where we see them going up against this Nazi kind of group, and just seeing Bonehead, Black Condor, and Firebrand going at it and duking it out right in the beginning in the double-page spread. I love Black Condor. I Will Show You Savage. I love his rage and his strength. But for me, none of that works if you don't have Firebrand's dialogue telling the story along the way. And that's something that Gray and Palmiotti are really masters at, in the sense that keeping balance to a scene and making sure that there's the right beats in there and the right storytelling going on. The Aryan Brigade, they make short work of them. But I really love the fact that our introduction to the team was not through all of them being together, was in like small moments where they were partnered up, and Uncle Sam would show up on the scene and start pulling them back together again. Something that they haven't seen Sam in a while, so this is a time where, why is Sam back? What does this mean for us? But that outer space sequence then, where we see Human Bomb dropped off there, he's ready to blow up asteroid coming towards Earth.
Yeah.
And there's creatures that are sitting there. And he's got to make this, like, how can I morally blow up this asteroid? But if I don't, what is it going to do to our planet? So he's got to make a decision here. I loved this whole thing, how it turned into a tag-off with the Ray, with Phantom Lady. How they were in a situation that they were having trouble dealing with. And because Human Bomb contacted them at right place, right time, she was able to use her powers to dump him back there so he could blow up their enemy. And she used her powers to teleport this to another place. And it was cool to see how the two of them, he basically couldn't fill her in on the whole story. He just said, this is what you need to do, and you switch spots with me, and I'll do what you need me to do. And they had to trust each other that, like, and it shows that they've been through things together before to the point where there is a relationship here. They know each other. They know they can trust each other. If one says one thing and the other says another thing, they're just going to go along with it, do what the person says, and trust that that's the right thing to do. Teams that haven't been together for a while, teams that don't have partnerships and don't have trust, they won't do that. They'll question everything. Without missing a beat, these two did not question each other. I really loved the energy in that sequence. And it lets people know, if you haven't been reading any of the Freedom Fighters below, these guys are familiar with each other. They trust. There's a bond there. It's for a while there we had some issues where there was so many DC teams that were in turmoil. It's great to see this growing trend now of showing us heroic DC teams together again in a variety of situations, showing us how they work together, even against overwhelming odds, to make things happen by making good use of their teammates and partners and kind of trading off and, do it. I love these kind of moments. It's something different that you don't see from a team interaction that much, and I really liked it. But I like this increased focus, and I think it's why we're very team book happy at the moment, is because so many of them are just showing us what works in team books now. I really am. I think there was a while there where my preference was towards solo series, and with a couple of the team books that were really hitting the right beats for me. Now I'm seeing this shift where there's a great balance of great solo series, but the team books are getting back on track again, and I'm really enjoying that energy at the moment, and I'm very happy in that way. And this is a great book where it's a great example of that, but I love that moment. I know you. I was like, Jim's got to be digging this moment with the shift here.
Dude, man, I'm just sitting here just, letting you go, and I'm just like, oh, my brother, testify. I was eating this up. This was just a bam out the gate. I wanted to read this. I always enjoyed this team. I enjoyed Graydon Palmiotti's writing of the team, and this hit right. Boom. This was a hammer right out the gate. I was so eating this up. I sat down, read it through multiple times already. And that the shifting, Black Condor gave me some great hoorah moments just with his nature, who he is. Just seeing him really just beat the snot out of him. I was loving that. But you are so correct that I cheered when I saw how they did the shifting, and even, especially Human Bomb. Human Bomb has, in the past, made the wrong choice. He has taken out innocent lives. He has detonated and killed people. And he's had to deal with the fact that he did that. We're seeing this hero has changed who he is. He's not going to destroy this primitive society just to save ours. He's a hero. He's going to find another way. And he immediately calls in for some backup, does a nice little flip-flop. Tag, you're in. Let me take care of that. I loved this. This was just such a fun, exciting read. If I tell you, I very rarely just really say to people, if you didn't pick this up, you got to pick this up. This is a title that I tell you, this is an issue that was just a fun, wonderful read. It, really, it's dudes, pick it up, dudes, and male and female listeners. If you guys didn't pick this up, or if you're on the borderline, I don't know, do yourself a favor. You will not regret it.
Highest possible recommendation.
Oh, yeah.
This is fantastic.
Yes, definitely. This is, and it's just great storytelling of going from one to one to one, flip-flopping around. Looking forward to seeing what this new big bad they just unleashed. Kind of like looks to me kind of like a Four Horsemen type deal. They're going to have some major big-time bad, especially because Uncle Sam was unable to detect inside that. And that was something Uncle Sam, who is connected completely to America, who gets his power from America, from just the concepts and the beliefs that we are, couldn't access, couldn't touch this, didn't know what this was. That has me going, oh, wow, this is something huge.
This is a great issue, though, for people who haven't read it before, because one of the great things about these shifting sequences where you get to see the characters in pairs, you get to know each one in these sequences, and it's a great introductory issue without doing the origin thing, because they've already done a lot of this in the previous minis. So this is a great way to deliver something to fans like us who've been reading it, while at the same time, because it was great, because it's been a while since we've had one of these minis. So for me, it was a great primer and refresher on like, oh, okay, this is who these guys are, and this is what we're doing, and it got me right back in the groove. But I felt like this is very accessible for a reader who hasn't read any of this yet. So it's a nice balance of like, hey, something for column A, something for column B. I got to shout out Travis Moore on pencils, Trevor Scott inks, Travis Lanham letter, Rob Schwager colors. Rob Schwager does the color work also on Jonah Hex, which I'm loving. And the atmosphere, the mood, the whole tone of this series and the first issue kicking off feels very unique, very different. I really, really loved this book for kicking off, and I am so glad this is monthly. To me, it's long overdue that this series gets a shot monthly. And I do want to urge people that, like, if you heard things about these books before and you stepped away from them or never, like budget-wise, you didn't want to try it, this is a great book for people who are like, I want to add a team book to my reading list. I want to try something a little new. I don't want to get into something that ties into, like, 80 gazillion things. This is a great contained book, and it's different. It's a different team book, and kudos to them for delivering this book and doing such a great job for it. I love this idea of the fact that what was the reason why certain elements of the Civil War ended? Well, was there something more there? Were there people playing behind the scenes? Were there weapons that were never used that could have changed the whole complexion of the way that the United States worked out? Could the South have won? And if those weapons weren't used, why weren't they used? What really was going on? What are the conspiracy theories there? I think that the villains we see at the end of this are only the first phase into a lot more secrets that we haven't ever seen before. And this book's going to explore some really different and unique things. And I'm looking very, very forward to that. This was just such a good and entertaining read. And I thought we'd be remiss if we didn't mention this and tell people to go buy that first issue.
A scarlet costume ejects from his ring, and in a blur of motion, police scientist Barry Allen becomes the Flash.
Hey there, Sean and Jim. This is Richard, Lantern Savage from the forums and the sporadic poster of the Jokerfish blog on your website, but I'm sure you already knew that. I usually listen to your podcast while I'm biking around town, but I'm always thinking of all these things to call in and tell you, but I'm usually biking for a few hours, and then by the time I get home, I'm tired, and I've forgotten all the points I wanted to make. So today I thought I'd come home and do a quick skim back through episode 219, which is the one I just listened to, and I just wanted to make some random comments about Brightest Day and some of the voicemails you had on the show. It's all kind of all over the place, and I had to make some notes so that I wouldn't forget what I was going to say, so I hope it doesn't just sound like I'm reading in a monotone, and I'll try not to talk too fast, even though I've got a lot of points to make, and you can just edit it, and you can cut it down to 5 seconds, so I'll just throw stuff out at random. Here we go. So you guys were talking about how the new resurrected characters were going to have to complete the mission so that they could stay alive properly, and it was making me remember a quote on DC's source blog from Jeff Johns about like how the 12 characters, basically some of their second chances were going to work out and some of them weren't. And I think that not all the characters are going to be able to complete their missions, and therefore those characters are going to go back to being dead again. I don't think Maxwell Lord's going to be one of the ones who stays alive. I think the JLI are probably going to prevent him from stopping or killing Magog. On a more like meta note, I don't think DC really want to kill off Magog or put him on a back burner, because that would mean sort of negating all of the Kingdom Come universe, and they kind of seem to like to go back to that Kingdom Come universe once in a while, and I really think they want to be able to have that universe or that possible future in their pocket for a long time to come so they can keep going back to it. And on top of that, the death of Maxwell Lord was a really big event in recent DC history, and it had a big impact on like Blue Beetle and Wonder Woman and so on, but I don't think they're going to have him running around like a crazy man on a permanent basis again. A couple of the other White Lantern missions are a little bit harder to figure out. I mean, I'm pretty sure Captain Boomerang's going to be able to throw his boomerang, and so therefore he'll stay alive. I'm sure Jeff Johns has future plans for him over in the Flash ongoing, and probably even in the Red Robin book as well. Whether or not Hawk will be able to catch that boomerang is a different matter, because if he doesn't, that means we'll end up losing both Hawk and Dove. I mean, assuming that the boomerang kills Dove. It seems like Osiris has a pretty good chance of freeing Isis, and most likely Black Adam as well. It's about time those characters returned, and it seems like it would be a pretty strange thing to be teasing at this point if it wasn't actually going to happen. I don't really have any ideas about Jade, because her mission seems to refer to things we haven't really seen in any of the books just yet. I don't think we've even seen a Eclipso since, like, Countdown, so it's hard to tell how her mission's going to go. I think there's a pretty good chance Aquaman will get to the new Aqualad before whoever they is, and I can only assume they is like Black Manta and whoever else he's working with. If Aqualad was going to be taken by them and perhaps turned into a villain or whatever, I don't think they would have created an Aqualad based on his character for the Young Justice cartoon, because it would seem like that would be kind of confusing, even though it's obviously two different universes and rah-de-rah. Plus, at Comic-Con, when they were talking about the Brightest Day teaser poster, Jeff Johns mentioned that he didn't know why Aquaman was dead on the poster, so for whatever that's worth. I highly doubt they're going to kill off Martian Manhunter, Hawkman, and Hawkgirl for the second time in a couple years, so the fun of this book isn't going to be so much about whether or not they'll be able to complete their missions. I think it's going to be more about just seeing how they manage to go about it. I don't think there's really any doubt there. But with Deadman, I mean, what's his mission? Is his mission to find the replacement for the White Entity? I mean, I can only assume that that's going to happen, but that means we'll have no Deadman anymore. We're just going to have Boston Brand, and it'll be kind of interesting to see what that means. Would he continue on as a White Lantern, or would he just be an acrobatic guy with no real superpowers? I'm kind of curious to see how that would play out. I think Firestorm's mission kind of plays into that too. Like, if they don't stop the Black Lantern Firestorm from killing the White Entity, then everybody's missions are pretty much screwed anyway. I think his mission will be another one of those ones where it's just kind of fun to see how it all plays out, rather than worrying about whether or not he's going to be able to complete it. I kind of like Dan's suggestion that Firestorm may become a merging of both Ronnie and Jason rather than one of them being a floating head. And if you look at that White Lantern version of Firestorm, he doesn't have any facial features, so it doesn't really resemble either Ronnie or Jason. And I can kind of imagine a new kind of Firestorm coming out of all this that has a featureless face, kind of like the Question, so that when the two of them are together in their Firestorm form, they don't look like either one or the other. Just that concept of two people forming together to make one hero presents kind of a lot of cool story possibilities. I mean, I can imagine, say, Jason's getting into trouble somewhere down the line, and he's being like, I gotta turn into Firestorm, and meanwhile somewhere Ronnie is having a party, or he's like with a girl or something, and suddenly, bloop, he's pulled away, and he has to become Firestorm without any kind of warning. And when they survive through Brightest Day, and I really think they will, I can't really imagine that they're not going to be present in at least one book or another, if not their own ongoing series. And if there was an ongoing series of Firestorm, then all the better. So Sean, you've got to be practically wetting yourself with joy once you read Brightest Day number 8, because Jeff Johns and Peter Tomasi are basically like world building with the whole Hawk mythos within pretty much one panel. And the way that they're revealing all that history about Hawkworld being connected to both Earth and Thanagar, and Hawkgirl's mother being the queen of Hawkworld, you have got to be totally loving that. I think Dan brought up some pretty good points about Firestorm and how characters in the past have referred to him as being someone who has the potential to be incredibly powerful. And if you look in your issue of Brightest Day number 8, there's even a Brightest Day advertisement in there, and it's kind of funny that they're advertising Brightest Day within Brightest Day, but whatever. There's an ad in there featuring Firestorm, and the tagline is, "So you mean together we could destroy the universe?" And I think that's a really cool indication of what we've got to look forward to with Firestorm, like these grand universe-destroying implications. So you all made some pretty good cases for Dove, Boston Brand, or Firestorm becoming the new White Entity, or at least like bonded with that entity. And I think that, yeah, it does seem like a lot of these leads are pointing towards one of them becoming Earth's new champion. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to make my own prediction. And personally, I think the new White Entity is probably going to be Dr. Fate. and I know that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but if you remember back when we were reading Blackest Night, and we found out that there was going to be a White Lantern, who did we guess it would be? It was like we were saying Hal Jordan, or Kyle Rayner, or John Stewart, or Guy Gardner, or Bruce Wayne, or The Flash, or Sinestro, like all these obvious choices. And did anyone really ever guess that Deadman would end up being the wielder of the White Ring? He was such an outside chance. And that's why I think Dr. Fate's going to be the new white entity. Just because. And also, just as a side note on that, in Brightest Day number 7, the white entity says, "Each one of you has returned to protect this world until the arrival of its new champion." Which to me sort of infers that none of our resurrectees are going to be the new white entity, because they're trying to protect the world while the new champion is arriving. So, I mean, that still leaves Dove as a possibility because she's not one of the returnees, but I'm still thinking it's going to be someone who we haven't thought of yet, like someone who has to arrive, apparently. I mean, that could be Bruce Wayne. He's about to arrive soon, and that would be totally awesome. But I am still going to go with Dr. Fate, and you heard that here first. I kind of wanted to give a little bit of a response to Jeff, who left you guys a voicemail about wanting to see DC take their characters back to their more iconic versions. And I totally understand where he's coming from, and I also totally disagree. And I know that that probably doesn't really make any sense. I remember a year or two back, Dan DiDio, or someone at DC, had actually mentioned that they were trying to get back to the iconic versions of their top characters. And I think they actually have in a lot of ways. I mean, if you look at who we have back now, we've got Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, Ray Palmer, Arthur Curry. I mean, we've even got Clark Kent back on Earth, you know, walking around solving everyday Joe's problems, and that's what he's been doing since the 30s. And even Bruce Wayne's on his way back. But I think, Sean, that you addressed Jeff's points pretty well, like when you talked about how it's hard to keep every fan happy all the time, and that for every fan who wants Dick Grayson to be Robin again, you've got a huge vocal group of fans who want him to be Nightwing again, and an equally large group who want him to stay as Batman. So what do you do? I mean, I think you do exactly what DC's already been doing, and just keep all the avenues open all the time. Dead is never dead, characters can be brought back, there's always an alternate universe, and new people can put on a cowl or a cape, and fresh characters can be introduced, like old characters can stick around. I just think it all comes down to which books you choose to read. I mean, there's got to be some people out there who are like, you know what, my Green Lantern isn't even Hal or Kyle or John or Guy, my Green Lantern is Alan Scott. But I mean, can you imagine if DC didn't allow the creativity that came through in the Silver Age to reinvent the character of Green Lantern? We'd have been stuck with nothing but Alan Scott for the last 60 years, and then there never would have been, I mean, Green Lantern Rebirth, Sinestro Corps War, let alone Blackest Night and Brightest Day. I mean, there's an entire Green Lantern Corps that would have never existed, and that goes the same for the Flash. There's like a huge contingent of fans out there now whose iconic Flash is Wally West, and just listening to the DC podcast, you can totally hear how vocal this crowd is. You got DC trying to bring back the iconic Barry Allen, and with Wally West temporarily on the back burner, there's already fans that are like jumping up and down and want their Wally back. So what do you do for them if you only have the iconic Flash? Then you've got a whole bunch of Wally West fans that you're ignoring. There was actually a really great quote from Kevin Smith on his Widening Gyre panel at Comic-Con, where somebody asked if he would ever do an ongoing series at DC. And he said that DC had asked him to already, but that he had basically turned them down because he couldn't commit to one ongoing series because he just didn't know how to do it. He said that he has random ideas for like these one-off stories or these story arcs like Batman Cacophony and Widening Gyre, but he said that he had a lot of respect for the writers who do actually tackle the ongoing stories because they have to, and I mean these are his words, but they basically have to figure out how to write this, what he calls the same stories over and over. And I mean, I don't know if I 100% agree with exactly what he's saying, but I sort of know what he means. Like the writers on the ongoing series really have to figure out how to keep things fresh all the time. And one of the ways they can do that is, I mean, one of the ways they can continue to be creative rather than rehashing the same stories over and over is to keep creating new characters. And sometimes that means putting someone new in the cowl, and sometimes that means putting the big S shield on someone else's chest. And I mean, that's how you keep bringing new readers in, and that's just how you keep selling comics. If DC had always kept just the iconic characters, never really let them evolve, there probably wouldn't even be a DC anymore. You'd probably have like one Superman comic and one Batman comic, and that'd be it. No one would stick to either series for very long because it'd be nothing but the same characters for years and years on end. And I think one of the testaments to the creative minds at DC is that they've been able to keep on creating new characters and like push the pre-existing characters into new places. So it keeps the current fan base interested and following the stories, and you also bring in new readers. And as it is, if you look at the books that are popular and selling well at the moment, you come up with titles like Green Lantern, Batman and Robin, Secret Six. A lot of the books that have writers who are always creating new characters and pushing their characters into weird new places. And if you like your characters set in a certain place and time, all you have to do is look for the right books. I mean, if you want your Batman to forever be Bruce Wayne, then you can pick up Batman Confidential, Superman Batman, any of the random one-shots or the miniseries that come out, like Batman Odyssey and Widening Gyre, or even if you want a classic Clark Kent Superman, you just pick up All-Star Superman. The Brave and the Bold often features very iconic versions of the characters from stories set in the past. The Alex Ross titles, like Justice, are really great, but that's because he has a huge love for the Golden Age and like very iconic versions of the DC characters, like that he sets in a very certain time period. But I think that's why Alex Ross works sort of a graphic novel here, a miniseries there, because I don't think you could put the Alex Ross versions of these characters into the current continuity and just keep them running. So I guess I kind of disagree on Jeff's idea of bringing everyone back to a certain status quo that aligns with a particular time in DC's past. I don't want to lose my Cassandra Cains and my Kyle Rayners or my Damian Waynes or my Ryan well, okay, it's a little bit too late for that one. But I do have to agree with Jeff on one thing, and that's his take on the current Justice League. I mean, poor James Robinson. He's obviously been trying really hard to make the JLA book his own, and he's been pulled this way and that, like, by the current continuity. And it only really feels like just now that he's been able to really start to establish the team he wants to use. But it just doesn't feel like the JLA to me yet, because I really love that idea of the Big Seven that Grant Morrison used, but that just hasn't even really been an option for anyone who's worked on JLA recently, because I mean, you've got your big three. Superman, he's been off planet. Wonder Woman, she's sort of in flux at the moment. Bruce Wayne's been doing the Sam Beckett thing, quantum leaping from life to life, striving to put right what once went wrong. And the Flash has been off doing his own thing. Green Arrow's been murdering people and breaking up with his wife, and it just kind of goes on and on. All those people who you usually associate with the JLA have been kind of busy in their own solo stories and involved in the big events of the last couple of years. So, to me, the last great JLA lineup was back in that recent story arc where they introduced the milestone characters into the DCU proper, where your JLA was Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Wally West, John Stewart, Black Canary, Vixen, Zatanna, Hawkgirl, Black Lightning, Firestorm, and Red Arrow. And I mean, that was just a perfect team, but this JLA doesn't feel like that yet. But I mean, I'm willing to give James Robinson a chance, even though I have my doubts that this team will really ever catch on. But I think of it this way: James Robinson's putting together a pretty cool team that may not feel like the JLA you're looking for, but it's still a pretty cool team nonetheless. So while Dick Grayson, Donna Troy, Congarilla, Starman, and the rest may not be the JLA you're looking for, they're still a pretty interesting team. They just happen to be featured in a book called Justice League of America. And I mean, I am totally willing to wait and see and hope and that it catches on with me the way that James Robinson's intending. But now, if you really want that classic Alex Ross, Grant Morrison style Justice League, I can tell you exactly what title you'll find them in. It's called Brightest Day. I mean, look at the characters that are featured in that book. Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Firestorm. If the big three were in there as well, you could pretty much call that a classic Justice League team. But of course, like, the big three are busy with their own stuff at the moment. Now, on a completely unrelated tangent, I have to say that I agree with that one caller who called up about how some of the new console games have fonts that are hard to read without an HD TV. I'd actually have to say that he's right. There are a few games that assume every gamer has a 50-inch HD TV, and they give you the smallest font possible when they're presenting text. And sometimes they're not even able to be read on smaller high-def TVs, but really those games are few and far between. And when it does happen, it's usually on a game that's not that well thought out in the first place, so it's not something you're really going to have to worry about that much. I've played my PS3 on a 32-inch standard definition TV and a 50-inch standard definition TV, and while the picture's nowhere near as enjoyable as my brother's 55-inch high-def TV, it's really not a huge problem. But hey, good on you, Jim, for going the HD route anyway. Oh yeah, and I got a book I wanted to mention for your favorite DC Comics of all time section, but I'm going to hold it back, and I'm going to review it on my Jokerfish blog, which all of your listeners can find on ragingbullets.com. But yeah, I know I haven't updated it for like a month, but I've got an all-time favorite that I'm going to be reviewing on there next, and it's a book that came out during Countdown, so there's a really vague clue. Oh yeah, one more thing. It's great to hear that there's more listeners coming into Raging Bullets, because you guys are one of the best comics podcasts there is. And I just got to say, if you're listening, you should get over to the Raging Bullets forums. Just go to ragingbullets.com and click on the forum button, because there were a few problems with the board hosts a few months ago, and it seems like that during the time the new forums were set up, we lost a few posters, but everything is fine there now, and it's really great. I love talking to the Raging Bullets listeners, because for the most part, you guys are all a relatively positive bunch, and that's totally refreshing in an internet world full of snarky sarcasm. I mean, not that I'm completely devoid of snarky sarcasm, just ask me about Dan DiDio's Outsiders run. Heyo! Anyway, that's way too much from me, and I'm sure you're all extremely bored to death, so I will talk to you guys later. See ya!
There's a lot of things you talked about. I'm not going to be able to touch on all of them. When you were talking about Firestorm, when you talked about that merger where they could be pulled from one place at a time, like if Ronnie was at a party and Jason was at school or something like that, that's actually something that is a part of the merger. That's something that has happened many times in past stories. I think what they were talking about when we were having the discussion was the idea that there was a feeling that maybe you might get Ronnie and Jason no longer being separate people. They are permanently merged, kind of a amalgamation of the two people. They would no longer be separate entities, which I don't see it going that route. I'm more with you that they're going to stay Ronnie and Jason, and it's interesting that you talk about that the actual Firestorm entity might look different, though. I do agree that there is going to be this new stage, this new evolution of Firestorm, because they've already hinted at that. That was something that the professor hinted at. So I'm talking the Firestorm entity itself could change, and I see that. I don't see the two people merging to make Firestorm changing, though. You and I are kind of a lot more in sync on that, in the sense that thinking that Ronnie and Jason are still going to be separate, and Firestorm might actually undergo a change from this. I don't know. I'm really curious to follow that story. That's one that's interesting. I liked your overall theme of great stories, great writing, great ideas when you were talking about, do we go back to the iconic characters? Do we have the newer versions of characters? And what versions do you do? I think a mix always works well, because you're right. There are those. I love iconic characters. I'm a big fan of Bruce Wayne returning, Hal Jordan, Barry, and all that. But yet, I like new versions of the characters as well. When you were talking about Aqualad and seeing that story, I'm interested to see where that character is going to go, because I think that is something that's going to add a new twist to Aquaman and make Aquaman interesting in a way that is different, fresh, and unique, and accessible to newer readers who maybe have never read Aquaman before. This Aqualad's going to be kind of a launching point into getting interested in him and his world from somebody who's brand new and seeing Aquaman from a brand new pair of eyes. When I said that, or I don't know if I said it, or when the conversation was brought up with Aqualad being taken by Black Manta and the other, I guess Atlanteans, Mira's people, I don't think the idea was that Aqualad would be taken permanently by them. The idea was if he was to be captured by them, that he would be recovered then by Aquaman and Mira. So I thought that would be interesting there. Killing Magog, I don't see Max Lord's edict being, the thing that he was handed down by the White Lantern entity being that he has to kill Magog. It's more that he has to stop Magog. And it is interesting, I don't know that the Kingdom Come world is considered to be one that is necessarily a guaranteed future in our world. I thought that was another world, and I might be wrong on this, I thought that was another world in the 52. So nothing about that means that Kingdom Come has to occur. I mean, if Magog here is destroyed, that the Kingdom Come wouldn't occur. I think bringing Gog here and what they've done with Magog has hinted at that there was a possibility that we could have a Kingdom Come-like future, but not that that was set in stone. So I don't know. That's interesting to see what direction that goes and what would happen with Magog. I'm with you that I think there's a possibility not all of the people brought back are going to complete their missions. Not all of them are going to gain life again. I also, though, I'm going to go on the other end and say we might be being led to believe that, in the sense that what if they all complete their missions? Max Lord, I agree with you. What if he comes back permanently? Is that even possible? And what would the world be like with him? I don't know. I agree with you. I see that there's a definite possibility that a character like that wouldn't be allowed back. It wouldn't make sense to bring him back. But what if he does? What if he does stay? And what does that mean? I don't know. Because he's definitely a character that needs to be put on a leash if he's back, because look what he's already doing. So I'm curious to see what happens there. You posed an interesting point. Can that character stick around? And what would that mean? I don't know. I don't know if that would be the case, if he will complete his mission or not. I'm enjoying following that because I think all bets are off. I don't know if any of them can. The Hawks darn well better be around, because you're right. I'm digging that something fierce. I'm enjoying reading the Hawks. I think one of the reasons why I don't talk about that as much on the show as probably people would think is because I was expecting to enjoy that, and I was expecting to love that, and I am. The Hawk beats that are going on in Brightest Day right now are absolutely stellar. I love what they're doing with Hawkgirl. I love what they're doing with Hawkman. They're adding, you're right, some things to expand the mythos, an increased understanding of who Shayera is and what her history is and how she plays into things. And I'm a big fan of them adding to the Hawk mythos and kind of exploring things that we never knew before, because they do that with all kinds of DC characters. It was something I was a big fan of in Wonder Woman. I'm always a fan of seeing Batman taken to a new place. It's all my favorite characters, seeing that. So now that they're doing this with the Hawks, I'm with you. I think the funny part is I was so expecting that from Brightest Day, and I'm so satisfied with that I don't talk about it as much on the show, where I'll talk about Aquaman more or Deadman more, because those are things that totally shocked me, that I'm like, whoa, wow, this is really cool. Firestorm is something that's a beat that I'm interested in following. Brightest Day across the board with Martian Manhunter and all these characters is incredibly satisfying for me, because I think they're giving great screen time to all the characters. They're shifting, like, just when you think that they've forgotten about a character, they shift major focus to that character. And in key ways, we're seeing that everybody has an important role in this overarching story. I loved your idea that it is kind of a Justice League team being brought together in that book. And I would love to see, more of those characters. I like the JLA right now a lot. I like the team, and I think that they are getting to the point where they are feeling like an iconic group of characters. You touched on a lot of the reasons why I'm liking this, because we finally started, instead of trying to fight and force these characters into places where they can't possibly be because, as you mentioned, they're busy in other storylines, let's take a look at other iconic characters in the DC Universe that have that kind of stature, and finally bump them up into top leadership roles where they can be a part of a team like that and really have huge adventures. I think that we're going to start seeing... See, and that's funny. I'm with you that they aren't quite there yet, but I'm liking that I feel that the journey is going there. We're going to be seeing Crime Syndicate versus this team soon. And that's something where to finally see them go up against these iconic JLA villains, and to finally see these characters go toe-to-toe with the mirror images of, the big leaguers, the Superman, your Batman, your Wonder Woman, and to see how these characters handle that is something that, for me, is, I think, where we're going to start seeing some real defining moments with Robinson's run of what he's trying to do with these characters. I think you're right. JLA has been a great example of a book that has suffered from things that are going on outside of it, that has forced characters out of positions where they could be those lead characters on this team. And that was, I think, the original point when the phone call was made, was that what if we did a JLA book that was outside of continuity? And I'm not against that. I actually think, doing a Magnificent Seven book outside of continuity would be great. But in continuity, I'm loving this team. This team works in continuity. They're iconic. They're deep characters. I've always wanted to see Dick Grayson lead the JLA. And I mean really have a good run as leadership of the JLA. The same way that I wanted Black Canary to be able to take that role and go with it. That was really cool when she was leading the team. And I wish that had gone further, it continued its logical conclusion. So, Dick Grayson, I want to see this role go. I want to see it take its logical progression. I want to see us have some really sharp, deep, iconic moments with this team and for it to have a chance. Because there's some really serious heavy hitters on this team that have been around for a long, long time that deserve that spot, and I'm hoping they get it. I'm hoping that run really delivers it. We'll see. Ultimately we'll see at this point. It's definitely in that phase where it's heading in that direction. I hope it stays that way. I don't know. Thank you very much for your call. As far as your thing for Dr. Fate being, the White Lantern, I don't know that I agree with you on that because of his role in JSA, but you make an interesting point in the sense that you're saying we didn't see Dead Man coming, so are we going to see the next person coming? Part of me still feels that Dead Man is the person that's being groomed for this, but I agree with your point that I'm not sold on that. I'm not sold on anything. So could Dr. Fate be it? Sure. I think anybody could Bruce Wayne be it? It's a definite possibility. I don't know how he would be a White Lantern, though, and be in Batman Inc. and Batman the Dark Knight. I don't know. I know he's going to be making an appearance in Brightest Day down the road. He's supposed to make an appearance there. I think there was some cover solicits, this month with Bruce Wayne on there. But I don't know, what does that mean? What role will he have? I don't know. I'm very curious to see where this is going. The Black Lanterns are supposed to be making a return appearance. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works into all this. Is that going to be a very brief appearance? Is it going to be the current heroes turning into the Black Lanterns, or is it going to be them having to face off against the Black Lantern versions of themselves? I don't know. I don't know where all that's going. But like I said, again, thank you very much for the call and for sending us just that great voicemail. Actually, you put together really a mini podcast in what you did, because you didn't actually call into the show. You emailed it to me, but thank you for that. This was really great. It was great to hear your thoughts and your insight. And if you haven't read the Jokerfish column, it's on Raging Bullets. And it's ragingbullets.com. Click on the Jokerfish link under the columns, and you'll get to see all of his previous offerings. And they're really great. It's his exploration of just various DC titles as he's going along. And it's been a really great read for me. I've actually loved all of the offerings. And I do welcome all of our listeners. If you don't have to necessarily do an ongoing column, if there's something, where, hey, geez, I've always wanted to blog about this, or I wanted to chat my thoughts about this, and something where you're doing like a column style thing, where it's an article, basically, that you'd like to post on our site, please feel free to let me know. It's ragingbullets@gmail.com. Our website's basically put together with community content, and I always want that to be the purpose. A lot of what Lantern Savage was just saying here was this idea that the forums are more positive, and it's, like you said, it's okay to get snarky about things, but yet we got to remember in there that we're also comic fans. I have no problem with people airing out criticisms and things like that. I just don't want that to be all you air out in the forums. Come out there and give equal time to something you love. We've had some interesting debates on the forums where, it's been two different sides of an issue, and I've loved every minute of those debates where we didn't agree. And that's part of the fun of going to a forum as well. I couldn't agree with you more, though, that I love going to the forum community. During the week when I'm putting together a show and podcasting, I'm not always able to participate in every discussion thread that goes up on our forum. I try to read as many of them as possible, though. There's a lot of times where I'll be on my lunch break and I'll scan through the forum and just see what people are posting. And it's really great to see the active discussion community. And he's right. The forum was down for a little bit, but it was really, we're done through the Comic Geek Speak forums. It's the Comic Forums, which is run by the guys over at Comic Geek Speak. And, I've been with them ever since they've been basically offered us a forum way back when we started podcasting. And it's a great community there. And if you haven't been there in a while, please jump back in. We love having everybody's discussion there. Feel free to bring your honest thoughts to there. Like I said, my only rule of thumb ever to anybody is if you're going to critique something, where you're being critical about it, on the other end, start up a thread or jump into a thread where you're raving about something that you love. Balance it out. Because I like that aspect of the forum as well. I don't want it all to be gripes. I want it to be, give some positive back to the community as well as something where you're criticizing something. Because we don't all have to agree on everything. We don't have to all like the same things. That's half the fun of debate, is seeing, why people are on different sides of the fence. So bring that there. But thanks a lot for the call again.
Oh, no, you don't!
Jim, our next episode, we're going to do a Gail Simone spotlight. We're going to talk about Secret Six. We're going to talk about Birds of Prey. We're going to talk about Welcome to Tranquility. We've got a couple other surprises of things that we want to talk about of Gail's. Some work outside of DC. Something that came out quite recently, and then something that I saw on her Facebook page that I picked up on a whim. And because I'm trying to she's my favorite author, and I'm trying to gradually get a collection of all of her work. And the only thing I'm missing in my personal collection is her Deadpool run. And that's something that I started buying collected editions of work of hers that I've already had, so that kind of derailed my quest to go after that. And that's the one thing that I'm missing in some of the Simpsons work. So I'm in my constant quest. Do you do that with authors? Do you start
Yes.
to... Do you do? Okay. Do you do it with artists too?
Not so much as artists, but I do it with authors. And
Because I do find that I do it with favorite authors, and I also do it with artists as well, because I like to see the artist growth, because we've talked about that a lot on the show. I'm actually find that I'm doing that a lot more in both cases. But I want to do this spotlight episode, and this is something I'm hoping we get a chance to do quarterly, where we pick a different favorite writer, artists, whatever, and talk about that. But Gail's my absolute favorite writer, and it's somebody who I really wanted to take an opportunity to these are some books we haven't talked about in a while deliberately, because we wanted to wait and do this. And there's a couple little things outside of DC that I wanted to mention as well that we'll save for that episode, but that'll be next week's. And then after that, we're jumping right into Batman the Cult. So we're set in stone for the next couple episodes with some big things that we're going to be talking about. So good stuff. I want to once again remind everyone to check out the New York Comic-Con. We have a handy-dandy link at RagingBullets.com, October 8th, 9th, and 10th. So be sure to click on that, check out the amazing guest list, and hope we can see you there. We're going to have a table in the podcast arena, and we'd love to see you and meet you. So please stop by and let us know if there's anything you want to record or chat about. We hopefully will be able to record with as many of you as possible, but we'd love to see you. We're also looking for a listener who might want to hang out at the table with us. We'd love to pay your admission in there to be kind of our quote-unquote employee for the con. Basically, we just need for a couple of panels somebody to cover us, mainly a couple of the main DC panels. It's always great to have somebody at the table. It's better if Jim and I get to go to both of those and have our reactions afterwards. So if you weren't planning on going to one of the DC Nation panels and you wouldn't mind covering the table for us, you'll get free admission to the con for doing it. So let us know. Sponsoring us this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, 75% off. Batman Inc. #1, Batman the Dark Knight #1, Thunder Agents #1. Each of those is 99 cents with that discount. Then you take a look at Superboy #1, same discount, 74 cents. It's a great way if you're thinking of trying out any of those titles, get those at those amazing discounts. Great way to try out these brand new books that are coming out from DC at a great price point. So thank you DCBService.com for those incredible discounts. InStockTrades.com, Batman the Cult, brand new printing of this trade paperback. Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrightson, $19.99 regularly, 47% off, only $10.59. 2 more shows till you can join us for that. And thank you very much for supporting us, InStockTrades.com. I want to remind everyone about ComicCollectorLive.com, your comic book management source. Jim, we will see everyone next week.
bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Fated for love and loss and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call